Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto became the vice commander of Tempest and married Shion and Shuna. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Stranger in the Storm. The end was not a bang, but a tearing. One moment, Naruto was standing on solid earth, the dust of the final battle still clinging to his tattered trousers. The air tasted of ozone and victory. Sasuke was beside him, a mirror of his own exhaustion, their arms, one of light, one of flesh, raised to push the last, writhing remnant of Kagaya's power into the seal. It was a volatile, unstable thing, a cosmic tantrum of energy that refused to die quietly. Sakura was behind them, her hands glowing, ready to mend whatever broke. Kakashi was a step behind her, his single eye weary but sharp. Team 7, reunited in the twilight of their war. Then the world ripped open. It wasn't a hole, not a neat circle of nothingness. Reality itself seemed to fray like old cloth, threads of light and color unraveling directly in front of Sakura. There was no sound, only a nauseating lurch as the very laws of physics stuttered. Naruto didn't think. He acted. He shoved Sakura back, a single, desperate push, his body moving with the instinct forged in 1,000 life-or-death struggles. His fingers brushed the edge of the non-space. And the world pulled. It was not a gentle suction but the grip of a gravity well. The pressure was instantaneous and absolute, a physical force that crushed the air from his lungs. He felt a phantom tearing sensation, as if his soul was being ripped from his body. Kit! What is this? Kurama's roar was a bellow of fury and confusion inside his mindscape, a raging anchor in a sea of vertigo. Naruto's vision dissolved into a nauseating smear of color. He felt the familiar warmth of his own chakra being violently siphoned, not stolen, but converted, as if being forced through a filter it was never meant to pass through. The pressure intensified tenfold, a mountain pressing down on every cell of his being. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. He was falling. The impact was brutal. He hit the ground hard, his momentum carrying him through a thicket of strange, pulsating flora that burst on contact, spattering him with glowing blue liquid. He rolled, his body screaming in protest, finally coming to a stop in a small clearing. For a long moment, he just lay there, face down in damp, alien soil. The air was wrong. It was thick, heavy, and so saturated with energy it felt like breathing water. It clung to his skin, seeped into his pores, a cloying, suffocating presence that made his own internal chakra network recoil in protest. Get up! Kurama snarled, the fox's own colossal energy reserves feeling oddly muted. This place, it's poison. It's trying to digest your chakra. Naruto pushed himself onto his hands and knees, head swimming. Kurama wasn't wrong. The atmosphere was dense with a form of energy he'd never felt before. It wasn't natural energy, not like the kind he gathered for Sage Mode. That was serene, a flowing river. This was a stagnant ocean, teeming with so much raw, chaotic life it was overwhelming. His senses, honed to detect the faintest flicker of chakra, were being fire-hosed. He staggered to his feet, taking in his surroundings. He was in a forest, but it was unlike any he knew. Towering trees with bark that shimmered with a faint, purple luminescence reached for a sky he couldn't see through their thick canopy. The ground was covered in a carpet of moss that glowed with a soft, internal light. The very air hummed. Where am I? The question was a dull thud in his mind. He tried to extend his senses, to feel for Konoha, for any familiar chakra signature. Nothing. It was like trying to listen for a whisper in the middle of a rock concert. The background noise of this world was deafening. The connection to the world is gone, Kurama stated, his voice grim. This isn't just another country, Naruto. This is, elsewhere. A twig snapped nearby. Instantly, Naruto's exhaustion fell away, replaced by the sharp-edged focus of a warrior. He dropped into a low crouch, his body a coiled spring. His eyes, blue as a clear sky, darted toward the sound. He didn't draw a kunai, he didn't need one. His fists were more than enough. From behind a thick, gnarled tree root, a figure cautiously emerged. It was short, no taller than his waist, with green skin, pointed ears, and wide, fearful eyes. It wore crude leather armor and held a rusty, chipped sword like a man holding a venomous snake. Another one appeared beside it, this one looking slightly older, more composed, but no less wary. Goblins. He'd seen them in picture books as a kid, but he'd never thought they were real. "Whoa, Rigger, look at that," the younger one whispered, his voice trembling. "What is he?" "He's not a monster, but the air around him feels heavy." The older one, Rigger, held up a hand to silence him. "Be cautious, Gobta. His energy is immense, but it feels different. Not demonic." He took a tentative step forward. "Greetings, traveler. You are in the great forest of Jura. May I ask your name and your purpose here?" Naruto remained silent, his gaze unwavering. He assessed them in a heartbeat. They were weak, pathetically so. Weaker than a fresh academy student. But they weren't hostile, just frightened. He could sense no killing intent, only a deep-seated caution. He was about to answer when the forest floor began to tremble. A low, guttural growl echoed through the trees, a sound that vibrated deep in his bones. The glowing moss flickered and died as a massive shadow fell over the clearing. Gobta shrieked, scrambling backward and tripping over his own feet. "No, no, no. Not a rift stalker. Not now." A beast lumbered into view, and Naruto understood their terror. It was enormous, easily the size of Gamabunta's head, a monstrous hybrid of a bear and an alligator. Its hide was a patchwork of thick, black fur and jagged, obsidian-like crystals that seemed to drink the light. Drool, thick and acidic, sizzled as it dripped onto the forest floor. Its eyes, 6 of them, glowed with a malevolent red light, and they were all fixed on him. "That thing was drawn to the energy from your arrival," Kurama noted. "It smells the tear in spacetime on you. Stand back." Rigger yelled, planting his feet and raising his flimsy sword. It was a gesture of pure, suicidal bravery. Several more goblins, a patrol by the looks of it, emerged from the trees, their faces pale with terror. They formed a shaky line, ready to die for their leader. The Rift Stalker ignored them. It saw Naruto as the source of the delicious energy, the main course. It lowered its head and charged, the ground shaking with each thunderous step. Naruto didn't move. He watched the beast close the distance, its massive jaws opening to reveal rows of crystalline teeth. He tracked its speed, its trajectory, the flex of its powerful muscles. "Move!" Rigger screamed at him. At the last possible second, when the monster's hot, foul breath washed over him, Naruto acted. He sidestepped the charge with an economy of motion so fluid it was almost lazy. As the beast's massive head rocketed past, he raised his right hand. A sphere of brilliant blue energy, spinning with a sound like 1,000 angry hornets, materialized in his palm. It was a simple, perfect Rasengan. He didn't yell an attack name. He didn't need the theatrics. He thrust his palm forward, slamming the sphere into the Rift Stalker's thick, crystalline flank. There was no grand explosion. There was a sickening grinding sound, a high-pitched shriek of tortured matter. The Rasengan didn't detonate, it drilled. It tore through the magic-resistant crystals, shredded the thick hide, and pulped the muscle and bone beneath. The Rift Stalker was thrown sideways as if hit by a speeding train, its body spinning through the air. It crashed into a cluster of the luminous trees, which shattered on impact, before finally skidding to a halt dozens of meters away. It didn't move again. A massive, spiraling crater was gouged into its side, smoking with raw, unfocused energy. Silence descended upon the clearing, broken only by the faint, fizzing sound of the Rasengan's dissipating energy. Naruto stood up straight, lowering his hand. He glanced at the goblin patrol. Every single one of them was staring, their mouths hanging open, their weapons forgotten. Gobta was on his back, pointing a shaky finger. Rigger's sword had slipped from his grasp, embedding its tip in the dirt. Their fear of the beast had been completely replaced by an even greater awe and terror of him. He sighed. So much for a quiet entrance. The journey to their village was a quiet, tense affair. The goblins, or hobgoblins, as Rigger had corrected him, walked in a wide circle around Naruto, treating him like an unexploded bomb tag. He didn't mind. It gave him time to think. He followed them, his sensor abilities on high alert, mapping out the forest as they went. He noticed dire wolves, huge and gray, moving with the patrol. They weren't leashed or caged, they moved as partners, and they gave him the same wide, respectful berth. This was a society of monsters. Organized, disciplined, and loyal to a fault. It was fascinating. "Our master, Rimuru-sama, will want to meet you," Rigger said, finally breaking the silence. He had to crane his neck to look up at Naruto. "He is wise and powerful. He will know what to make of you." Rimuru, Naruto repeated the name, committing it to memory. A powerful master. That explained their confidence and their rapid evolution from scrawny goblins to these more robust hobgoblins. Someone had named them. As they cleared the last line of trees, the forest opened up into a massive clearing. What Naruto saw made him pause. A town was being built. Not a ramshackle collection of huts, but a genuine settlement, with wooden houses, paved streets, and the beginnings of a defensive wall. Dwarves with thick beards and powerful arms hammered away at a forge, their rhythmic strikes echoing through the air. Goblins and hobgoblins worked everywhere, their movements efficient and purposeful. At the center of it all, overlooking the construction from a small rise, was a simple, blue, teardrop-shaped, slime. Naruto blinked. The slime was bouncing slightly, as if in thought. Despite its unassuming form, Naruto could feel it. This was the center of the web. The energy radiating from it was potent, dense, and tightly controlled. This was Rimuru. Rigger bowed low. "Rimuru-sama. We have returned. We found this individual in the forest." The slime jiggled and turned. Two faint slits that resembled eyes appeared on its surface. It hopped down from its perch and glided over to them, its movements smooth and silent. It stopped a few feet in front of Naruto, its form seeming to appraise him. "Notice. Unidentified individual. Energy signature is immense but does not match any known pattern for monster, demon, or spirit. Analysis commencing. Error. Unable to classify energy type. It is not magicules. Relabeling as unknown high-density energy. Caution is advised." The voice wasn't audible, but Naruto felt the probe, a strange, analytical sensation washing over him. It was like being scanned by a Yamanaka, but cold, detached, and utterly alien. He stood perfectly still, letting it happen. He had nothing to hide, and hostility would get him nowhere. "So," a youthful, friendly voice emanated from the slime, though it had no mouth. "You're the one who caused that energy spike. And took out a Rift Stalker without breaking a sweat, I hear. I'm Rimuru Tempest. Leader of this town and the Jura Tempest Federation. And you are?" Naruto met the slime's gaze. He felt a faint pressure begin to build in the air, a subtle attempt at intimidation. A familiar tactic. He'd faced down the Rakichs. Killing intent without flinching, this was like a gentle spring breeze. He let it wash over him, his own vast, placid reserves of power acting as an unbreachable wall. The pressure vanished. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," he said, his voice calm and even. "Naruto Uzumaki," Rimuru repeated. "You're human, aren't you?" But no human I've ever heard of can do what you did. And that energy, it's not magic. It's chakra, Naruto replied simply. And yes, I'm human. But I'm not from around here. A moment of silence passed between them. It was a conversation happening on multiple levels. The spoken words were a formality. The real communication was in the feel of their auras, the measure of their intent. Naruto sensed a sharp, calculating intelligence within the slime, but no malice. He sensed curiosity, caution, and something else, a familiarity he couldn't quite place. Not from around here is the understatement of the century, I'd bet. Rimuru's voice held a new tone, one of dawning realization. That energy spike, it felt like the world tore a seam. You came through it, didn't you? Naruto nodded slowly. There was an accident. I was pulled through a rift. A rift, Rimuru echoed. He bounced slightly. I was summoned here myself. And I used to be human, too. From a place called Japan. Naruto's eyes widened, just a fraction. It was the first chink in his guarded composure. Japan. The name was archaic, a relic from a time before the hidden villages, but he knew it from the history scrolls. You know it? Rimuru sounded surprised. I've read about it. My world, it's different now. But that's where it started. A bond, thin but tangible, formed between them in that instant. Two castaways from the same lost world, stranded in a land of magic and monsters. Look, Rimuru said, his tone shifting from curious to practical. I don't know how to send you back. But you're here now. You're powerful, that's obvious. But you're also adrift. I'm building a nation here. A place where all races can live together in peace and prosperity. It's a big dream, and I need all the help I can get. He paused, letting the offer hang in the air. I can give you a place to stay. Food, a roof over your head. A purpose, if you want one. All I ask in return is that you help us build and protect this home. Naruto looked around. He saw the dwarves and hobgoblins working together. He saw the dire wolves resting peacefully near the children's play area. He saw the beginnings of a real community, built on a foundation of mutual respect. It was the very dream he had fought and bled for, the one he'd achieved for Konoha, but it felt purer here. Newer. He was a hero in his world, the seventh Hokage in waiting. But that role felt like a suit of armor he was supposed to grow into. Here, he was just Naruto. A stranger with a strange power. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. What do you need done? Naruto asked, his voice low. A wide, cheerful-looking eye slit appeared on Rimuru's face. For now. We're behind on construction. We need to get the outer wall finished before winter, and our lumber crews can't keep up. Naruto considered this for a moment. He looked at the half-finished wall, then at the distant tree line. A slow smile, the first genuine one since his arrival, touched his lips. It was a wry, confident expression that completely changed his face. All right, he said, stepping back into an open space. Everyone might want to stand back. He brought his hands together in a familiar cross-shaped seal. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. There was a series of loud poofs, like a string of firecrackers going off all at once. In the span of 3 seconds, the clearing was filled. Where one blonde-haired man had stood, there were now 1,000. Each one was a perfect, solid copy, crackling with tangible energy. They stood in neat ranks, awaiting orders, a silent, disciplined army that had appeared from thin air. The entire town went dead silent. The hammering stopped. The chatter died. Every single hobgoblin, dwarf, and direwolf stared, their minds unable to process what they were seeing. Kaijin, the dwarven master smith, dropped his hammer with a loud clang. Rigger's jaw, which had just returned to its normal position, fell open again. Rimuru's slime body seemed to stretch upward, the visual equivalent of a double take. Alert! Alert! Catastrophe-level energy surge detected. 1,000 distinct individuals have materialized from a single source. Recalculating threat level. Error. Cannot compute. This is awesome. Rimuru's voice squealed with undisguised glee, cutting off Great Sage's frantic analysis. The original Naruto pointed toward the forest. You heard the boss. We need lumber. He then pointed to the construction site. And we need builders. Let's get to work. 1,000 voices roared in unison, you got it, boss. The effect was instantaneous and revolutionary. Half the clones, a force of 500, streamed into the forest. The sound of chopping began almost immediately, a deafening, rhythmic thunder that shook the leaves from the trees. The other 500 swarmed the construction site. They formed teams, lifting massive logs as if they were twigs, quarrying stone with bare hands, and assembling sections of the wall with a speed and coordination that was utterly inhuman. In a single afternoon, they accomplished what would have taken Rimuru's entire workforce 2 weeks. As the sun began to set, casting long, purple shadows across the valley, the clones dispersed in puffs of smoke. The information, the exhaustion, the splinters, all flowed back to the original Naruto. He let out a long breath, feeling the strain, but it was a good kind of tired. The kind that came from a hard day's work. The outer wall was finished. Rimuru glided up to him, his form practically vibrating with excitement. Naruto, that was. I don't even have words. You're hired. Permanently. You want a title? A position? Name it. Head of construction. Chief of security. Anything. Naruto looked out at the completed wall, at the town bustling with activity, now safe and secure. He looked at the faces of the hobgoblins, their earlier fear of him now replaced with wide-eyed reverence. He had a place to be. He had a job to do. He had a purpose. It was simple, straightforward, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of profound peace settle over him. No title, Naruto said, turning to face the slime. Just a place to belong is enough for now. You can put me on security. Protecting things, that's what I'm good at. Security it is, Rimuru agreed instantly. Welcome to Tempest, Naruto Uzumaki. Later that night, Naruto lay on a simple but comfortable cot in a newly built house that had been assigned to him. It was sparse, empty, but it was his. The silence was absolute. There was no hum of electricity, no distant city noise, no familiar sounds of Konoha. It was the deep, profound silence of a world that was not his own. He was truly, completely alone. A castaway on an alien shore. It's not so bad, Kurama's voice rumbled, softer than usual. This Rimuru is sharp. The people are hard workers. It's a good place to start over. Yeah, Naruto thought, a wave of exhaustion finally washing over him. A place to start over. He closed his eyes, the strange, heavy air of this world a blanket around him. For the first time since he'd arrived, his body and mind began to relax, letting go of the tension, the caution, the readiness for a fight that had been his constant companion for years. He was safe. He was useful. He was home. Not yet. But it was a start. As he teetered on the edge of sleep, a thought, cold and sharp as a shard of ice, pierced the quiet of his mind. It was not his thought. It was not Kurama's. It was utterly alien, a whisper from the void, a line of code written on his soul. Paradox detected, dimensional anomaly registered, commencing purification protocol. Naruto's eyes snapped open in the darkness, every instinct screaming. The peace was gone, shattered. He sat up, his heart pounding, his senses scanning the night. There was nothing there. No enemy, no chakra, no killing intent. What was that? Kurama growled, the fox's presence a blazing inferno inside him now. I felt it too. It was like being watched by a star. Cold. And distant. Naruto stared out his window at the two strange moons hanging in the night sky. The warmth of his new beginning was already being chased by a chilling, unknown shadow. He had found a sanctuary, but in doing so, he had tripped a wire, an alarm he never knew existed. He was no longer just a castaway. He was a target. Chapter 2, The Oni's vow. The days in Tempest fell into a rhythm. It was the rhythm of a hammer on steel, of saws cutting wood, of a nation being born from sheer force of will. For Naruto, it was the rhythm of purpose. His role in security wasn't one of standing guard on a wall, it was one of fundamentally reshaping Tempest's ability to defend itself. He stood in a wide, freshly cleared training field, the morning sun casting long shadows. Before him stood 200 hobgoblins, the core of Tempest's security force. They were bigger now, stronger, filled with a sense of pride, but they were still a mob. They fought with brute strength and clumsy swings, relying on numbers and the blessings of their master. "All right, listen up." Naruto's voice cut through the morning chatter, sharp and clear. It wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that commanded instant silence. For the last week, you've been running laps, doing push-ups, and building muscle. That's good. But strength is useless if you don't know how to use it. He held up a single, small bell that tinkled in the breeze. Today, we're going to learn about teamwork. About thinking. Your objective is simple. He tied the bell to his belt. Take this from me before sundown. You can come at me with everything you've got. If you can't get the bell, you don't eat dinner. A murmur went through the crowd. Gobta, standing in the front rank, puffed out his chest. Only one bell, Naruto Dano. There are 200 of us. This will be easy. A few others nodded in agreement. From the edge of the field, two figures watched. Benimaru, the fiery-haired Kijin commander, stood with his arms crossed, a thoughtful expression on his face. Beside him, the towering, purple-haired beauty, Shion, scoffed. "Humph. What a strange test," she said, her hand resting on the hilt of her enormous odachi, the Hercules edge. "If you want to test their strength, you should fight them. This is just a game." Benimaru's red eyes remained fixed on Naruto. "I don't think so. Watch. There's more to him than just raw power. He moves with a purpose I haven't seen before." Naruto grinned, a sharp, foxy expression. "Easy, huh? Then the test has begun." The hobgoblins charged. It was a wave of green skin and guttural war cries, a disorganized, chaotic mess. Naruto didn't move. He stood, relaxed, as the first wave reached him. A goblin swung a club. Naruto swayed an inch to the right, the weapon whistling past his ear. He tapped the goblin on the back of the neck with 2 fingers. The goblin's eyes rolled up, and he crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Another lunged with a spear. Naruto sidestepped, grabbing the shaft and using the goblin's own momentum to spin him into 3 of his comrades, sending them down in a heap. For the next hour, it was a masterclass in evasion. Naruto was a phantom, a leaf on the wind. He never took a single step back, yet no one could land a blow. He moved through the throng of bodies with a liquid grace, a blur of orange and black. The hobgoblins grew tired, frustrated, their initial confidence draining away with their stamina. "This is pathetic." Shion grumbled, her knuckles white on her sword's hilt. "He's just dodging. Why doesn't he fight back? I could take that bell in 5 seconds." "Could you?" Benimaru asked quietly. "He hasn't even drawn a weapon. He hasn't even used one of his jutsu. He's treating 200 trained soldiers like unruly children, and he's not even breathing hard." Shion fell silent, her violet eyes narrowing. Benimaru was right. There was an effortless quality to Naruto's movements that was deeply unsettling. It wasn't just speed, it was a perfect, instinctual understanding of space and timing. Finally, a frustrated Gobta rallied a small group. Okay, new plan. He's just one guy. We'll all jump him at once. They dogpiled him, a mountain of struggling bodies. From the bottom of the pile, there was a soft poof. The hobgoblins looked around in confusion, then at the empty space where Naruto had been. Looking for me? His voice came from a high branch of a nearby tree. He was lounging on it, the bell glinting in the dappled sunlight. He hadn't even broken a sweat. The day wore on. The hobgoblins tried traps, ambushes, and coordinated attacks. Nothing worked. They were thinking as individuals, trying to be the one to grab the bell. Naruto, with the help of a few hidden clones, led them on a chase across the entire training ground, exploiting their lack of cohesion, turning them against each other with simple tricks and misdirection. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, the exhausted, demoralized hobgoblins lay scattered across the field, groaning. Naruto hopped down from the tree. Time's up. You all fail. He walked over to the goblin he had first knocked out. You. What's the first thing I told you? The goblin struggled to his feet. To get the bell. Wrong. Naruto pointed at Gobta. You. What did I say? Gobta, covered in dirt and leaves, thought for a moment. That we wouldn't get dinner. Naruto sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. He walked into the center of the group. I said, we're going to learn about teamwork. The goal wasn't for one of you to get the bell. It was for all of you to work together to get it. If you'd come at me as a single, coordinated unit, with a plan, with feints and distractions and a real strategy, you might have had a chance. But you acted like a mob. You got in each other's way. You competed instead of cooperating. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link, but a pile of chains is just a heap of scrap metal. Understand? A silence fell over the group as the lesson sunk in. It wasn't about individual glory. It was about the strength of the pack. He's good, Benimaru said, a note of genuine respect in his voice. He's not just a fighter. He's a commander. Shion didn't answer. She was watching Naruto with a new, intense focus. The frustration she'd felt had been replaced by a burning curiosity. She strode onto the field, her massive sword slung over her shoulder. The hobgoblins parted before her like water. You, she called out, her voice ringing with challenge. You move well. But you hide behind tricks and games. Fight me. No clones, no running. Just you and me. Let's see what that chakra of yours can really do against a Kijin's full strength. Naruto turned to face her. He took in her powerful stance, the sheer intimidating presence she projected. He could feel the raw, untamed power bubbling under her skin. It was impressive. He gave her a lazy smile. Sure. Why not? But are you sure you want to do this in front of everyone? Might be embarrassing for you. A vein throbbed on Shion's temple. You'll regret saying that. They moved to the center of the field. The air grew thick with tension. Shion drew her odachi. The blade was as tall as she was, a monstrous slab of polished magic steel that hummed with latent power. She took a two-handed stance, her knuckles white. Ready, she growled. Naruto just stood there, his hands in his pockets. Whenever you are. That was the only trigger she needed. Shion exploded into motion. She wasn't just fast for her size, she was cataclysmically fast. She closed the 20-meter gap in an instant, her sword descending in a silver arc meant to cleave him in two. Naruto didn't dodge. Not this time. He simply raised his right hand, catching the flat of the massive blade on his open palm. The impact created a shockwave. A boom echoed across the field, and a crater formed beneath Naruto's feet from the sheer force of the blow. The ground cracked and split. But Naruto hadn't moved an inch. His arm didn't even tremble. The colossal odachi, a weapon that could shatter a castle wall, was stopped cold. Shion's eyes went wide with disbelief. It was like hitting a mountain. "Good swing," Naruto said conversationally. He tightened his grip. The magic steel of the sword groaned. With a flick of his wrist, he twisted the blade, wrenching it from her grasp. The odachi flew through the air, end over end, and embedded itself deep into the ground 50 meters away. Before Shion could even react to her disarmament, Naruto was on her. He flowed forward, a blur of motion. It wasn't a flurry of attacks. It was a single, precise sequence. A light tap to her wrist to break her stance. A sweep of his leg that took her feet out from under her. As she fell, he caught her, spinning her around and locking her in a hold from behind, one arm securely around her neck, the other pinning her arms. It was over in less than a second. She was completely, utterly neutralized. He leaned in close, his breath warm against her ear. "Your strength is incredible, Shion. Truly. I've only met one other person with natural power like yours. But you swing it like a club. There's no finesse, no control. A sword needs an edge. Let me help you sharpen it." He released her. Shion stumbled forward, catching her breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. She wasn't angry. She wasn't humiliated. She was shaken. No one had ever handled her like that. They either met her strength with greater strength, or they were obliterated. This was different. He had dismantled her, effortlessly, with a precision that was both terrifying and beautiful. She turned to look at him, her violet eyes wide with a dawning, fervent respect. This man wasn't just strong. He was on a completely different plane of existence. Later that week, while Shion was throwing herself into his training with a newfound, zealous devotion, Naruto found himself drawn to the quieter side of Tempest. He stood in the doorway of the large hall where the weaving and tailoring was done. Inside, dozens of hobgoblin women worked the looms, their movements becoming more skilled by the day. At the center of it all, directing the work with a quiet grace, was Shuna. She wore a simple pink and white Miko-style outfit, and she moved with an elegance that seemed to make the whole operation flow more smoothly. She wasn't giving loud orders. A quiet word here, a gentle guiding hand there, and problems were solved, efficiency was improved. She held a different kind of authority than Benimaru or even Rimuru. It was a soft power, but it was just as absolute. She noticed him standing there and offered a small, warm smile. "Naruto Dano. Is there something you need?" He walked in, feeling slightly out of place amongst the looms and threads. "No. Just watching. You're good at this. At leading." Shuna's smile widened slightly. "I simply try to help everyone do their best. It is my duty to my brother and to Rimuru-sama." She tilted her head, her pink hair falling gracefully over her shoulder. Her gaze was intelligent and perceptive. "You seem to be finding your place here as well. Shion has been singing your praises. Or, rather, she's been training until she collapses every day, which for her is the highest form of praise." Naruto chuckled, rubbing the back of his head. "She's a monster in a good way. Just needs a little direction." "We are all monsters here," Shuna said softly, her tone without malice. "And you are not. Yet you command more respect than any of us. It's strange." She paused, her eyes searching his. "You seem to carry a great weight, Naruto Dano. Even when you smile. Do you miss your home?" The question was simple, direct, and it cut through his guard more effectively than Shion's sword. He looked away for a moment, his gaze falling on a bolt of vibrant orange cloth. "My home," he said, his voice quiet. "I fought my whole life for it. My dream was to be acknowledged by everyone, to become their leader, the Hokage. I achieved it. The war ended, the world was at peace, and I felt empty." He met her gaze again, his own blue eyes holding a deep-seated loneliness. It's weird. Here, nobody knows me. Nobody expects anything from me other than what I can do right now. And it feels lighter. Shuna listened, her expression full of an empathy he wasn't used to. To be valued for who you are, not for a title you must bear. I think I understand. My brother carries the name of our people. Rimuru-sama carries the fate of our nation. Such burdens are heavy. It is a blessing to have someone who can help carry them. She reached out and gently took the hem of his black jacket. It was still the one he'd arrived in, tattered and torn from his final battle. This is frayed. A hero should not have to wear rags. Let me mend it for you. The gesture was small, simple, but it resonated deep within him. It was an act of quiet care, of domestic kindness he had rarely experienced. He found himself nodding, unable to form words for a moment. He had people who would fight and die for him. But he couldn't remember the last time someone had offered to simply mend his clothes. A bond formed between them in that quiet hall, woven not from shared battles, but from shared understanding. Shuna saw the man beneath the legend, the soul beneath the staggering power. And he saw the steel will and profound wisdom beneath her gentle exterior. The peace was shattered. By the sounding of an alarm, a deep, resonant horn that echoed from the town's watchtower. Naruto was instantly on alert. He and Shuna rushed outside. The sky to the west was darkening, a roiling mass of black and purple clouds that was swallowing the daylight. A palpable wave of dread washed over the town. Sui, the master of stealth, appeared in a flicker of shadow next to Rimuru, who had glided to the center of the plaza. Rimuru-sama. A report. Sui's voice was strained. An ancient magical beast, a creature of immense calamitous power, has been revived. It's Charybdis. The name sent a wave of fear through the assembled monsters. Charybdis is accompanied by 13 flying monsters known as megalodons. Sui continued. Their target seems to be the entire forest. And we are directly in their path. Naruto looked up at the approaching storm. He could feel it now. A colossal, malevolent presence at its center, and smaller, but still incredibly powerful, signatures circling it like sharks. So, that's the boss fight for this area, huh? Rimuru's voice was tense but determined. A moment later, a streak of pink light shot across the sky and a small girl with blonde pigtails landed with a ground-shaking thud. Milim Nava, the Dragonoid Demon Lord. Rimuru. I felt something super strong. Is that it? Can I fight it? Please. Rimuru sighed. Milim, perfect timing. Yes, you can fight it. But we have to protect the city. He turned to his executives. Benimaru, get your forces ready. We're dealing with a sky full of hostiles. What are your orders, Rimuru-sama? Benimaru asked, his hand on his sword. This was a scale of threat Tempest had never faced. The executives were powerful, but 13 megalodons plus a living hurricane was too much. I have a better idea, Naruto said, stepping forward. All eyes turned to him. Rimuru, you, Milim, and anyone else who can fly and fight on that level, you handle the big one. Charybdis. Keep it occupied. Don't let it get near the city. He looked at Benimaru. Benimaru, your forces will be the last line of defense. Form a perimeter around the town. Anything that gets past me, you kill it. Understood? Benimaru nodded, recognizing the logic in the strategy. Gets past you? Shion asked, stepping to his side, her odachi already in hand. What are you going to do? Naruto grinned, cracking his knuckles. Me? I'm going to handle the small fry. He brought his hands together. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. In a rolling wave of smoke, 2,000 Naruto clones materialized, filling the plaza and spilling out into the streets. The army he had used for construction was now a war host. The megalodons are ours, the original Naruto commanded. He created one more clone, which stood beside him, its eyes closed in concentration. This was his command post. Spread out. Form an interception net. Don't let a single one of those overgrown fish reach the city. Go. 2,000 voices roared their assent. The clones surged, a golden tide flowing out of the city. They leaped onto rooftops, scaled the outer walls, and shot into the trees, forming a massive, multi-layered defensive sphere. Rimuru watched, stunned for a second. Naruto wasn't just a fighter, he was a one-man army and a master strategist all at once. You heard him. Let's go, Melim. As Rimuru and Melim shot into the sky like comets toward the roiling storm, Naruto took his position on the highest point of the city hall, Shion right beside him. He closed his eyes, linking with his command clone. Instantly, a perfect three-dimensional map of the entire battlefield appeared in his mind, fed by the senses of 2,000 clones. He could see everything. First wave incoming. North-northwest, he said, his eyes still closed. Squads 1 through 50, engage. Use wind style to disrupt their flight patterns. Aim for the fins. Shion watched in awe. Far in the distance, she saw the shapes of the megalodons, flying sharks the size of houses, break from the clouds. And then she saw them meet the golden tide. Hundreds of Naruto clones swarmed them. Spiraling spheres of blue energy slammed into their armored hides. Blades of wind sliced at their fins, sending them tumbling from the sky. It was a maelstrom of coordinated violence. A second group is trying to flank from the east. Low altitude. Naruto's voice was sharp. Squad 70 to 100. Intercept. Don't let them get below the tree line. The battle was a symphony of destruction, and Naruto was its conductor. He gave orders, redirected forces, and plugged gaps in their defense before they even fully formed. Not a single megalodon got within a kilometer of the city. Shion, her sword ready, found herself with nothing to do but watch him command the battlefield with an ease that was breathtaking. He had become the city's shield. High above, the fight against Charybdis raged. Rimuru, Melim, and the aerial forces were giving it their all, but the beast's regenerative power was immense. It was a creature of pure, mindless destruction. Rimuru. Naruto's voice suddenly rang in his master's mind via Sui's thought communication link. We've cleared the sky. The megalodons are down. But the clones are running on fumes. We have one big shot left in us. Create an opening. A clear shot at its core. We'll end this now. Rimuru, battered but resolute, understood. You got it. Phobius. Tear. Bind it. The Karyu, the Demon Lord's powerful subordinates, unleashed their ultimate attacks, trapping Charybdis's swirling form in a prison of spectral chains and black lightning. For a single, critical second, the monster's core, a pulsating sphere of dark energy, was exposed. Now, Naruto. On the rooftop, Naruto's eyes snapped open. He held out his hand, and a hurricane of chakra gathered in his palm. It shrieked, a sound that tore at the very air, forming not a sphere, but a spinning, four-pointed shuriken of pure energy. Wind style, Raisin Shuriken. He hurled it. The attack flew with impossible speed, a miniature star that crossed the sky in a heartbeat. It struck Charybdis's exposed core. There was no explosion. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a microscopic storm erupted. The Raisin Shuriken expanded, and countless, invisible blades of wind began to shred the core on a cellular level, severing the magical bonds that held it together. Charybdis let out a silent, soul-tearing scream as its very essence was unmade. It dissolved, not into chunks of flesh, but into dust, a cascade of corrupted magicules that harmlessly dissipated in the wind. The dark clouds broke. Sunlight streamed down onto the forest. The battle was over. Naruto's clones all vanished at once, and the backlash of fatigue hit him like a physical blow. He staggered, catching himself on the rooftop ledge. The Raisin Shuriken had taken nearly everything he had left. He had done it. He had protected his new home. That evening, in Rimuru's main office, the mood was celebratory. They had faced a calamity-class threat and emerged with 0 casualties. Rimuru floated before Naruto, his form glowing faintly. Naruto. Today, you were more than just a security officer. You were a commander. Your strategy, your power, you saved this city. The title of Head of Security is no longer enough. He paused, the attention of every executive in the room, Benimaru, Shuna, Shion, Sui, Hakuru, Kaijin, fixed on them. I am the Chancellor and King of the Jura Tempest Federation, Rimuru declared. But a king needs a right hand. A commander for his armies who is second only to himself. Naruto Uzumaki, I am officially naming you Tempest's vice commander. The title settled into the room, heavy with meaning. It was a declaration of absolute trust and authority. Benimaru was the first to react, a wide, genuine grin splitting his face. He bowed his head. I will follow your orders, Vice Commander. The other executives followed suit, offering their own pledges of loyalty. Naruto was taken aback. A vice commander. A leader of a nation. It was a responsibility he never asked for, but one he had earned. Then, Shion stepped forward. Her expression was fiercely serious, her violet eyes burning with an emotion he couldn't quite name. She knelt before him, a gesture of profound fealty. As vice commander, you will require a secretary to manage your affairs and a personal bodyguard to protect your back, she stated, her voice thick with unwavering conviction. I claim those roles. From this day forward, I am your sword and your shield. My life is yours to command. It was more than a soldier's pledge. It was a vow. A promise that ran deeper than loyalty, forged in the crucible of battle and born from a place of awestruck devotion. Naruto looked at her kneeling form, then at the smiling face of Shuna, who gave him a subtle, encouraging nod. He looked at Rimuru and the others. This was his new team. His new family. He reached down and gently placed a hand on Shion's shoulder. Get up, Shion. I accept. It's good to have you by my side. As she rose, a brilliant, radiant smile lit up her face. In that moment, Naruto felt the last vestiges of his old world's loneliness begin to melt away. He had a home. He had a purpose. And he had people who stood with him, not because of a prophecy or a destiny, but because of who he was. Chapter 3, The Politics of Power. The victory over Charybdis echoed far beyond the borders of the great forest of Jura. A calamity-class monster, a creature that had terrified nations for centuries, had been annihilated. Not just repelled, but erased. The whispers that followed were not of the demon Lord Malim, whose involvement was expected, but of the monster nation of Tempest and its mysterious new power. It was this whisper that brought the carriage to their gates. It was an opulent thing, all polished lacquer and gilded trim, pulled by 4 pristine white horses. It flew the flag of the kingdom of Blumund, a golden lion on a field of blue. This was not a military expedition, this was diplomacy. And diplomacy, Naruto was quickly learning, was its own kind of battlefield. He stood beside Rimuru at the main gate, flanked by Benimaru and Shion. He wore a new, high-collared black jacket, expertly tailored by Shuna, with the swirling orange Uzumaki crest embroidered on the back, a small piece of himself stitched into his new life. His official title of vice commander was still new, and it felt heavier than any scroll or weapon he had ever carried. They seem nervous, Naruto said quietly, his gaze fixed on the approaching delegation. His sensory skills, no longer overwhelmed by the ambient magicules, could now pick up the subtle tells. He felt the rapid heartbeats of the men inside the carriage, the faint tremor in the hands of the guards. Wouldn't you be? Rimuru's voice replied from his human form, which he had adopted for the occasion. He had found it put humans more at ease. They're willingly entering a nation of monsters that just vaporized a walking apocalypse. They're probably expecting to be the main course at dinner. The carriage stopped. The door opened and a portly man in fine silk robes stepped out, mopping his brow with a handkerchief despite the cool morning air. This was Baron Velyard, Blumen's Minister of Finance. He was followed by a handful of aides and a contingent of royal knights, whose polished armor couldn't conceal their unease. Velyard's eyes scanned the welcoming party. He saw the powerful Kijin, the hobgoblin guards who stood with military discipline, and the slime-turned-human leader. His gaze was wary but professional. Then his eyes landed on Naruto. And they froze. The Baron's unease curdled into something else. Fear. Deep, instinctual fear. While Benimaru and the others radiated a powerful, but understandable, demonic aura, Naruto was a void. A blank space where a colossal power should be. To a man like Velyard, whose life revolved around quantifiable assets and predictable outcomes, Naruto was a terrifying anomaly. A human who commanded monsters. A man with an unreadable aura who stood as second-in-command to a demon lord. This was not a variable, this was a cataclysm waiting to happen. Lord Rimuru Tempest, Velyard began, offering a stiff but correct bow. On behalf of King Doram of Blumend, I extend our greetings. We have come to discuss recent events and the possibility of establishing formal diplomatic ties and trade. Welcome to Tempest, Baron Velyard, Rimuru said with an easy smile. We are a nation of peace. Please, come in. We have prepared a place for you to rest and talk. The negotiations took place in the new town hall, a large wooden building that smelled of fresh-cut pine. The initial talks were tense. Velyard was a shrewd negotiator. He danced around the issue of Tempest's military might, focusing on trade goods and road access, all the while subtly probing for weaknesses, for leverage. His primary focus, however, was Naruto. Your nation's strength is undeniable, Lord Rimuru, Velyard said, his eyes flicking to Naruto, who sat silently beside Rimuru, his expression unreadable. And it is commendable that you have fostered such loyalty among your people. However, some in our kingdom might find it unsettling that your second-in-command is a human. It raises questions of his loyalty. To whom is he truly sworn? A human leading monsters is an inversion of the natural order. Shion, standing behind Naruto, bristled. Her hand went to her sword hilt, a low growl rumbling in her chest. Naruto simply placed a hand on her arm, a silent command to stand down. Naruto's loyalty is to Tempest and its people, Rimuru stated, his smile not wavering but his eyes growing a fraction colder. His position was earned through deeds that saved every single person in this city. He is the guardian of this nation. His species is irrelevant. Of course, Velyard said quickly, raising his hands placatingly. I meant no offense. It is merely a political reality we must navigate. For our kingdoms to have a stable relationship, there must be predictability. Lord Naruto's immense and unquantifiable power is the very definition of an unknown quantity. He was trying to diplomatically isolate Naruto, to paint him as a rogue element that Rimuru needed to contain. Naruto remained silent. He let the Baron talk. He had sat through council meetings in Konoha with elders far more stubborn and prejudiced than this man. He knew this game. Let the opponent reveal their entire strategy before you make your first move. He fears what he can't understand, Kurama grunted inside his mind. And he can't understand you. He's trying to put you in a box, Kit. A box labeled, threat. The talks were adjourned for a midday meal. Rimuru had arranged a feast, a display of Tempest's bounty. Shion, in her new self-appointed role as secretary, had insisted on preparing a dish. Herself. It sat on the table now, a purplish, gelatinous mound that quivered ominously. As everyone politely tried to ignore the dish, Naruto's head snapped up. A faint, cold whisper echoed in the back of his mind. The same sensation he'd felt that first night. Paradox located. Purge the stain. Restore the balance. His eyes narrowed. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The room fell silent. "What is it, Naruto?" Rimuru asked, instantly on alert. "Something's coming," Naruto said, his voice low and dangerous. "It's here." Before anyone could react, the roof of the town hall exploded inward. Wood and shingles rained down as a figure dropped into the center of the room, landing in a crouch that cracked the floorboards. He was a knight, clad in ornate, silver-white armor that seemed to shine with an internal light. His helmet was fashioned in the shape of a stoic, angelic face, and a pristine white cloak billowed around him. In his hand, he held a great sword that burned with a cold, white flame. The energy radiating from him was not demonic. It was holy, sanctified, and utterly, chillingly hostile. His entire being was focused on one target, Naruto. Dimensional heretic, the knight's voice boomed, distorted by his helm. It was a voice filled with righteous fury. "You are the source of the unraveling. The sickness that plagues this world. In the name of cosmic order, I am Sir Gideon, the Warden's herald, and I will purge your unnatural existence." Baron Veliard and his aides screamed, scrambling back against the wall in terror. Rimuru's executives drew their weapons, moving to intercept. "Stay back," Naruto commanded, his voice cracking like a whip. "He's not here for you. He's here for me." Gideon lunged. He didn't charge, he simply ceased to be in one place and appeared before Naruto, his flaming sword swinging in a lethal arc. The speed was immense, far beyond what any normal knight should be capable of. Naruto met the charge head-on. He didn't use a jutsu. He didn't even draw a kunai. He crossed his arms in a simple block. The impact was cataclysmic. A shockwave of force erupted from the point of contact, blasting the dining table to splinters and sending everyone, monster and human alike, flying backward. Shion dug her heels in, her massive strength the only thing keeping her on her feet as she shielded the Baron's delegation. Rimuru was blown back, but reformed his human shape instantly, his eyes wide with shock at the power being displayed. Only Naruto stood his ground. He held the knight's flaming blade at bay with his bare forearms, his sleeves smoldering but his skin untouched. The white fire, a holy energy that should have scoured any unnatural being, sputtered and died against his chakra-infused body. "Warden! Order!" Naruto grunted, pushing back against the immense pressure. "What are you talking about? You feign ignorance, Paradox." Gideon roared, putting more strength into his strike. "Your very presence here is a crime against creation. You bleed energy from another reality. You will tear this world apart at its seams." The knight disengaged, flowing back and launching a series of blindingly fast thrusts. Each one carried the weight of a battering ram, and each was aimed at Naruto's vital points. The room became a blur of white flame and black and orange motion. To the terrified onlookers, it was an incomprehensible storm of violence. They weren't trading blows, they were clashing concepts. Holy, ordered energy versus the raw, vital chaos of chakra. Naruto moved, his body flowing like water. He parried the flaming sword with his knuckles, deflected it with the edge of his hand, the impacts creating thunderous claps of sound. He was being purely defensive, analyzing his opponent. This herald was strong, incredibly so. Stronger than most Kage he had known. But his movements were rigid, predictable. He was a weapon, not a warrior. All power, no guile. And he was only focused on Naruto. He completely ignored Shion, Benimaru, and everyone else, as if they were nothing more than furniture. "Your turn," Naruto said, finding his opening. He ducked under a wide swing, his body spinning low to the ground. He popped up behind Gideon, his hand alight with swirling blue energy. Rasengan. He slammed the sphere into the knight's back. The attack, which had turned the Rift Stalker into pulp, hit the holy armor and exploded in a shower of blue sparks. The herald was thrown forward, but he caught himself, his armor scorched and dented, but not breached. Your profane energy cannot break a vessel of the order, Gideon declared. Then I'll just have to try a little harder, Naruto replied. His eyes changed. The pupils elongated, becoming toad-like slits. A faint orange pigmentation appeared around his eyes. He had entered Sage mode. The shift was instantaneous and absolute. The very air in the room grew heavy. The natural energy of the world, which had always been a stagnant, chaotic ocean, suddenly rushed toward him, a willing torrent flowing into a worthy vessel. To the others, the change was subtle. To Gideon, it was like the sun had just ignited indoors. Naruto's presence, which had been a powerful but contained anomaly, had just swelled to a terrifying, cosmic scale. It was as if he had become one with the world itself. What is this power? Gideon stammered, taking a step back for the first time. It is of this world, yet it is not. Blasphemy. This is the power of the world you're trying to protect, Naruto said, his voice now layered with a resonant calm. He disappeared. He reappeared directly in front of Gideon, his fist cocked back. It was a simple punch, thrown with none of the flashy grace of a Hyuga or the acrobatic flair of a taijutsu specialist. It was a pure, unadulterated application of force, powered by his own immense strength and the limitless energy of the natural world. The punch connected with Gideon's chest plate. The sound was not a clang of metal. It was a dull, final thump, like a meteor striking the earth. The herald's pristine, holy armor, a vessel of divine power, didn't just dent. It shattered. It exploded outward in a cloud of incandescent white shards. The knight himself was lifted from his feet, his body arching back as the force of the blow traveled through him, and was blasted clean through the back wall of the town hall. Naruto slowly lowered his fist. The sage mode markings faded from his eyes. Silence returned, thick and heavy. The entire front half of the town hall was a wreck. In the center of the room, Naruto stood, untouched. Baron Velyard was on the floor, his face the color of parchment, staring at the Naruto-shaped hole in the back wall. His political maneuvering, his attempts to isolate the vice commander, all of it seemed like a child's game in the face of this reality. He hadn't been negotiating with a variable. He had been trying to leash a god. His prejudice hadn't just been shattered, it had been pulverized and scattered to the winds. Sui appeared at Naruto's side, having already been to investigate. The body is gone, he reported, his voice tight. There is nothing left but this. He held up his hand. A faint, cold white energy swirled in his palm for a moment before dissipating into nothing. It's the same energy from the attack. He dissolved. A herald, Naruto murmured, looking at his own hand. So this warden has others. And he sent one here, to attack me in front of a human delegation. It wasn't just an assassination attempt. It was a message, Rimuru finished, walking up to him. He looked at the wreckage, then at the terrified Blumend envoys. Or a political maneuver. Naruto's eyes met Rimuru's. They both understood. The attack wasn't just meant to kill him. It was meant to expose him, to paint him as a source of chaos and destruction in front of the very people Tempest needed to build alliances with. The warden wasn't just a brute force, it was intelligent. It was playing politics on a cosmic scale. Baron Velyard finally found his voice, a shaky, reedy thing. That night, he was from the Holy Western Empire, wasn't he? The armor, it's the style of their legendary paladins. No, Naruto said, his gaze distant. He was from somewhere else. Serving something else. He looked down at the Baron. You were worried I was an unknown quantity, Baron. You were right. But you were worried about the wrong things. The real unknown isn't me. It's the thing that's hunting me. His point was made, more effectively than any words could have managed. Velyard now saw Naruto not as a threat to be contained, but as a shield against a far greater, incomprehensible horror. The kingdom of Blumend wouldn't fear Tempest's vice commander now. They would see him as a necessary, terrifying guardian. Later that evening, as the cleanup crews worked to repair the town hall, Sui delivered his full report in Rimuru's office. My clones have followed the faint energy trail left by the herald's arrival, Sui said, his form emerging from the shadows. The signature is not singular. There are faint, similar traces, like echoes, scattered across the continent. They are strongest near the nations bordering the Jura forest. The Western Holy Empire, the Dwarven Kingdom, even faint traces near the Eastern Empire. So the Warden is planting its agents everywhere, Rimuru mused. Or corrupting existing ones. Turning them into heralds. This is an infiltration, not an invasion. And they're all pointed at me, Naruto finished, leaning against the wall. The pieces were starting to fit together. A celestial entity of order, a paradox, heralds, purification. This wasn't a war he had started, but it was one he would have to finish. The door to the office opened softly. Shuna entered, carrying a tray. She walked past the others and stopped in front of Naruto. On the tray was a new cloak, a simple but elegant black garment lined with deep orange silk. It was a replacement for the one that had been singed in the fight. She didn't say anything. She just held it out to him. Her eyes were full of a quiet, fierce concern. It wasn't the awe of a subordinate or the fear of an envoy. It was the worry of someone who cared. Naruto took the cloak. The fabric was soft, the stitching perfect. It was a simple gesture of support, a silent promise that he was not alone in this fight. He slung it over his shoulders. It felt right. Thank you, Shuna, he said, his voice softer than it had been all day. She gave him a small nod, her own unspoken vow hanging in the air between them. We will face this together. He looked out the window at the darkening sky. The threat was no longer a vague whisper in the dark. It had a name, a method, and a motive. And it was closing in. Chapter 4, The Harvest of Wrath. The intelligence came not as a formal report, but as a trickle of whispers from 1,000 unseen mouths. Naruto's shadow clone network, a sprawling web of spies disguised as merchants, travelers, and common laborers, had become Tempest's invisible eyes and ears across the continent. They sat in taverns in Blumend, worked the docks in the Dwarven Kingdom, and listened to the grumbling of soldiers in the border forts of the Kingdom of Falmouth. It was from Falmouth that the whispers grew into a damning chorus. Naruto stood before Rimuru in the main command center, a map of the western nations spread out on the table between them. Shuna, Benimaru, and Hakuru were present, their faces grim. They're not just considering it, Rimuru, Naruto said, his voice flat and hard. He tapped a location on the map, a border town inside Falmouth's territory. They're mobilizing. King Admalis has secured the backing of the Western Holy Church and a cadre of otherworlders. Their target is Tempest. They're painting us as a demonic threat that needs to be purged. The intelligence is certain? Benimaru asked, his hand clenching into a fist. I have a clone sweeping the floors in King Admalis's throne room, Naruto replied without looking up. He complains about us in his sleep. It's certain. They plan to march in 3 days, under the pretense of investigating Charybdis's defeat. Their goal is to provoke a conflict, declare us hostile, and conquer our city. The room fell silent. This was not a mindless monster. This was a calculated act of human aggression, wrapped in the sanctimony of religion and greed. What is the scale of their force? Hakuru, the old Kijin swordmaster, asked, his eyes closed as if in meditation. 10,000 knights and soldiers, led by their royal knight captain, Fulgen. They're bringing 3 powerful otherworlders, Shogo, Kyoya, and Kirara. And they have Archbishop Reihime of the Western Holy Church with them. He's the one who can erect the Holy Field Barrier, a wide area ward that weakens monsters and negates most of our magic. Rimuru's human face was a mask of cold fury. He had worked so hard to build bridges with humanity, and this was their response. Greed and fear. We cannot allow them to set foot in our city, Rimuru stated. I agree, Naruto said. Which is why I propose we don't wait for them to arrive. A preemptive strike. I can take a small, elite team, myself, Sui, Shion, and infiltrate their command camp the night before they march. We decapitate their leadership, the king, the archbishop, the otherworlders. The army will fall into chaos and retreat. No invasion, minimal bloodshed. It was a shinobi solution, swift, surgical, and ruthless. It was the kind of plan he would have proposed as Hokage. Benimaru nodded in approval. A bold plan, but an effective one. It would prevent a larger war. But Rimuru hesitated. His past life as Satoru Mikami, a modern Japanese man, recoiled at the idea of assassination, of slaughtering humans before they had even committed a crime on his soil. No, Rimuru said, his voice firm. We can't do that, Naruto. We can't be the aggressors. If we do, it will only prove their propaganda right. It would make us the monsters they claim we are. We will prepare our defenses, we will warn them, and if they still choose to attack, then we will show them the folly of their actions. But we will do it on our terms, defensively. A flicker of frustration crossed Naruto's face. It was the fundamental difference between them. Rimuru still held on to a human idealism that Naruto had lost somewhere in the blood and ash of the Fourth Great Ninja War. He had learned the hard way that peace sometimes required a heavy, preemptive hand. Rimuru, Naruto argued, his tone low but intense. That idealism is going to get people killed. They are coming here to slaughter us. Every single man, woman, and child. Showing restraint is a luxury we can't afford. It's not restraint, it's principle, Rimuru countered, his own voice rising. The temperature in the room dropped. We are building a new kind of nation here. We have to be better than them. We will not sink to their level. We will set up a defensive posture, and I will handle the invaders myself when the time comes. Your job, Vice Commander, is to ensure the city's defenses are prepared. That is my final decision. The ideological friction was a palpable thing in the room. Naruto held Rimuru's gaze for a long moment, a silent clash of wills. One was a king trying to build a perfect world. The other was a warrior who knew perfect worlds didn't exist. Finally, Naruto gave a short, sharp nod. As you command, Lord Rimuru. He turned and walked out of the room, his shoulders stiff. Shion shot a worried glance at Rimuru before following him. He was a soldier. He followed orders. But a knot of cold dread coiled in his stomach. He had seen this before. Hesitation in the face of absolute threat. And it always ended in tragedy. The next 3 days were a blur of frantic preparation. Under Naruto's cold, efficient command, Tempest transformed. He didn't just prepare defenses, he turned the entire city into a kill box. Anti-personnel traps were laid in the forests. Defensive positions were established on every rooftop. Evacuation routes were drilled until the civilian monsters could run them in their sleep. He worked with a grim, relentless energy, his clones managing every facet of the preparation. He was preparing for the worst-case scenario his leader refused to see. He stood on the city wall on the third day, watching the western road. The air was still. Too still. Then it happened. A faint shimmer in the air, followed by a nauseating lurch. A semi-transparent dome of light, woven from golden scripture, flickered into existence, covering the entire city and a wide swathe of the forest around it. The holy field barrier. Instantly, every monster in Tempest felt it. It was a physical weight, a suffocating pressure that drained their strength, dulled their senses, and choked their ability to use magic. The hobgoblin guards on the wall stumbled, their knees buckling. Benimaru, standing beside Naruto, gritted his teeth, a sheen of sweat breaking out on his brow. Naruto felt nothing. His chakra was not magicules. The barrier had no effect on him whatsoever. But he was an island in a sea of suffering. Then the screaming began. From the direction of the city's western entrance, where a temporary camp had been set up for human merchants, came the sounds of slaughter. The Falmouth army hadn't bothered with a declaration of war. They hadn't even marched on the city proper. Their first act was to butcher the innocent humans who had dared to trade with Tempest. A message. Naruto's hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles turned white. His eyes, fixed on the forest, blazed with a cold, helpless fury. He had known this would happen. He had told them. Rimuru had wanted to wait, to not reveal their hand too early, to let the enemy make the first move and expose their malice to the world. And this was the price. The screams of the dying were a testament to his leader's misplaced hope. This is the cost of your principles, Rimuru. The thought was bitter as ash. The Falmouth Knights, emboldened by the barrier and the lack of resistance, finally entered the city proper. They laughed and jeered, cutting down any monster that couldn't flee in time. They were not soldiers, they were butchers. And at their head, the otherworlders, Shogo, Kyoya, and Kirara, strolled through the streets as if on a leisurely walk, their power a palpable threat. Shion stood beside Naruto on the wall, her body trembling not from weakness, but from barely suppressed rage. She looked at him, her violet eyes filled with a desperate plea. "Vice Commander, the order." "Hold," Naruto commanded, his voice a low growl. He was bound by Rimuru's order. He had to wait. And every second that passed felt like an eternity of failure. The Falmouth army swarmed into the central plaza. And then, Rimuru acted. From the center of the plaza, a voice echoed, cold and devoid of all its previous warmth. "You have been judged. The verdict is death." The sky darkened. And a storm of divine fury rained down. Megiddo. Countless, concentrated beams of sunlight, refracted by water droplets created by Rimuru, lanced down from the heavens. Each one was a pinprick of lethal heat, a silent, instantaneous death sentence. The Falmouth soldiers, who had been laughing moments before, were pierced through their helmets and hearts. They died before they even knew they were under attack, their bodies collapsing in silent heaps. It was a systematic, merciless, and utterly efficient cleansing. The moment Megiddo began, Naruto moved. He didn't join the large-scale slaughter. That wasn't his role. His role was the scalpel, not the sledgehammer. Shion. Sui. With me, he commanded. The commanders. The otherworlders. The archbishop. They're ours. The three of them became phantoms. Sui melted into the shadows. Shion, her rage now channeled into a cold, focused purpose, moved like a purple blur. And Naruto. Naruto became death itself. He appeared behind a contingent of temple knights who were trying to rally a defense near the town hall. They were the elite, protected by lesser holy wards. They turned, sensing him, their eyes wide with shock. They saw only a flash of gold. He moved through them, his hands glowing with chakra. He didn't use a Rasengan. He didn't need to. A chakra-enhanced strike to the throat, a precise jab to the heart, a heel kick to the temple. It was the cold, pragmatic lethality of the Kage. He moved with the grim efficiency of a man who had ended a war. In 5 seconds, 20 elite knights lay dead or dying, their holy wards shattered like glass. Kyoya, the brutal swordsman, was busy deflecting Megiddo's light beams with his sword when Sui's threads wrapped around his limbs. Before he could use his severance skill, a golden shape dropped from the sky. It was one of Naruto's clones. It didn't say a word. It just drove a kunai blade coated in wind chakra through the back of Kyoya's neck, severing his spinal cord. Kirara, trying to use her bewilderment skill to cause chaos, suddenly found her mind invaded. It wasn't a jutsu. It was the raw, overwhelming force of Kurama's malice, projected by Naruto from across the battlefield. The sheer, ancient hatred of the nine-tailed fox slammed into her psyche. Her mind, used to being the aggressor, broke. She collapsed, screaming, blood pouring from her eyes and ears. Shion found Archbishop Reiheim, who was frantically trying to strengthen the holy field barrier. He was surrounded by a phalanx of his personal guards. She did not bother with stealth. She charged, a demon of vengeance, her odachi a blur of silver. The guards' spears and swords shattered against her skin. Her roar of fury was the last thing they ever heard. She cut through them as if they were reeds, and with a single, horizontal swing of her Hercules edge, she took the archbishop's head from his shoulders. The original Naruto found the last two targets in the central plaza, the royal knight captain, Fulgen, and the otherworlder, Shogo. They stood back to back, desperately fending off the rain of light. Naruto walked toward them, the bodies of their fallen soldiers littering the ground around him. He moved with a slow, deliberate pace. He was no longer a hero. He was a reaper. "You," Fulgen snarled, his face pale with terror and disbelief. "The human vice commander, you are the demon." "No," Naruto said, his voice quiet but carrying over the din of battle. "I'm the man who told my king this would happen. I'm the one who begged him to stop you before you took a single step. You didn't have to die. But you chose this." Shogo laughed, a crazed, nihilistic sound. "So what? We'll just take you with us." He charged, his berserker skill activating, his body swelling with power. Naruto didn't even look at him. A clone appeared at his side, catching Shogo's wild punch. The clone then calmly drove a Rasengan into the otherworlder's stomach, ending him. Naruto's eyes remained fixed on Fulgen. "It's over." Fulgen screamed and charged, his sword held high. Naruto sighed. He raised a hand. A single shadow clone appeared behind the knight captain. The clone formed a Rasengan and pressed it, almost gently, against Fulgen's back. The captain's armor crumpled, and he was thrown forward, landing in a heap at Naruto's feet, his spine shattered. The battle was over. The invading army was annihilated. The holy field barrier, its caster dead, flickered and died. Strength and magic flooded back into the monsters of Tempest. The silence that followed was more deafening than the slaughter. Naruto stood in the plaza, surrounded by the dead. The cost of victory. The price of hesitation. He looked up at the sky, where Rimuru was descending, his aura swirling with the souls he had just harvested. The harvest festival had begun. As Rimuru's transformation into a true demon lord commenced, a process that would take several days, Naruto stood guard. He did not rest. He did not celebrate. He oversaw the grim cleanup, his clones working silently alongside the shell-shocked people of Tempest. He was the pillar of stability, the unblinking eye of the storm. He stood on the hill where Rimuru's cocoon of energy now pulsed, overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of blood and gold. He felt a presence beside him and turned. It was Shion. She was covered in the grime of battle, her purple hair matted with sweat and dirt. Her armor was dented, her odachi still stained. She didn't say anything. She just stood beside him, her presence a silent, unwavering testament. She had seen his cold, lethal side, the part of him that was a pure weapon, and she had not flinched. She had matched it with her own fury. "He'll be all right," she said, her voice rough. "Rimuru-sama is strong." "I know," Naruto replied, his gaze still on the city. "But this didn't need to happen. Not like this." He finally let the mask of the commander fall, and the raw, bone-deep weariness showed on his face. He had seen too many wars, too many massacres. He had hoped, foolishly, that this new world would be different. "You did what you had to do," Shion said softly, her voice losing its usual boisterous edge. She had seen his argument with Rimuru. She understood the burden he now carried. You protected us. I'm the vice commander, he said, a bitter edge to his voice. My job is to advise him. To see the threats he can't. I failed. No, Shion's voice was fierce, cutting through his self-recrimination. She took a step closer, her shoulder brushing his. You did not. You followed your orders. And when the time came, you were the blade that cut the deepest. You saved us all. Rimuru-sama provides the heart. You provide the will to see it protected. No matter the cost. He looked at her then, truly looked at her. In her violet eyes, he saw not just devotion, but a profound understanding. She saw his strength and his pain, his competence and his scars, and she embraced all of it. He thought of the cost of peace, a price paid in blood and souls, a currency he was all too familiar with. He looked at Rimuru's cocoon of light, at the city that had so nearly been destroyed. And he made a silent vow. He would not let Rimuru bear a burden like this alone ever again. He would be the shadow to his leader's light, the pragmatist to his idealist. He would do the things that Rimuru couldn't, make the hard choices, and bear the sins so that his king wouldn't have to. That was his role. That was his promise. The promise of the vice commander. Chapter 5, A Demon Lord's Council. The silence of the harvest festival was a strange, holy thing. For 3 days, a dome of dark, swirling energy encased Rimuru, pulsing with the immense power of countless souls. Within that sphere, a god was being forged. Outside, a nation held its breath. And Naruto took command. He did not sit on a throne. He did not issue grand proclamations. He became the nation's unblinking, unshakable core. The title of vice commander ceased to be a title, it became a fact, as tangible as the ground beneath their feet. While Benimaru and the others were overcome with grief and the process of revival Rimuru had initiated, Naruto was a rock against which the tides of chaos and fear broke. His first act was to deal with the captives. King Admalis of Falmouth and the kingdom's chief mage, Raisin, had been captured alive, per Rimuru's final orders. They were held in a hastily constructed cell in the city's new prison, a place of cold stone and magical seals. Naruto entered the prison alone. The air was cold, damp. The king, stripped of his finery, was a blubbering wreck, curled in a corner, mumbling about demons and divine retribution. Raisin, however, sat cross-legged in the center of his cell, his expression a mask of arrogant defiance. He was a man who had lived many lives, a powerful mage who believed himself to be a player in the great game. He saw Naruto and sneered. Come to gloat, monster lover. Raisin spat. Enjoying your new master's power? It won't last. The world will not tolerate a monster nation on its doorstep. You've only signed your own death warrant. Naruto didn't answer. He pulled a simple wooden stool from the guard station, brought it to the front of Raisin's cell, and sat down. He didn't project killing intent. He didn't radiate power. He just sat, his blue eyes calm and steady, and looked at the mage. The silence stretched. 1 minute. 5. 10. Raisin's sneer began to falter, replaced by confusion, then irritation. What do you want? The mage finally snapped, unnerved by the quiet, patient scrutiny. I want to understand you, Naruto said, his voice a low, even murmur. You're powerful. You've lived for centuries. You've seen the rise and fall of nations. And you chose to throw in your lot with a greedy, foolish king for a war of conquest against a nation that had done you no harm. Why? Raisin laughed, a harsh, grating sound. You wouldn't understand. It's about power. The natural order. Humans rule. Monsters serve. That is the way of the world. Your little utopia is an aberration, an illness that must be cured. The natural order, Naruto repeated, a faint, humorless smile touching his lips. I knew a lot of people who believed in things like that. They believed that power was determined by your clan, by the secrets in your blood. They believed that those with power had the right to rule over the weak. They're all dead now. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze never leaving Raisin's. Let me tell you what I see. I see a man who is afraid. You've spent centuries accumulating power, knowledge, influence. You made yourself a big fish in a small pond. Then you saw us. You saw Lord Rimuru, a being of immense, unquantifiable potential. You saw a nation of lesser beings achieving prosperity and strength that rivaled your own kingdoms. And it terrified you. Because our existence proves that your entire worldview, the foundation of your power, is a lie. Raisin's face flushed with anger. You know nothing. I know everything, Naruto continued, his voice dropping, becoming as cold and sharp as a shard of ice. I know that true power isn't something you hoard. It's something you use to protect others. I have more power in my little finger than you have accumulated in all your lifetimes, and I use it to build houses and train soldiers. Lord Rimuru has the power to shatter continents, and he uses it to create trade agreements and ensure children have enough to eat. You have power, and you use it to start wars for profit. You're not a player in a great game, Raisin. You're just a parasite. The word struck the mage harder than any physical blow. They weren't an insult, they were a diagnosis. A cold, clinical dissection of his very soul. Every word rang with an undeniable, crushing truth. Raisin's arrogance, his shield for centuries, cracked. My power, my knowledge, he stammered, his defiance crumbling into desperation. Naruto stood up, pushing the stool back into place. Your power means nothing if it has no purpose beyond itself. Your knowledge is worthless if it brings only destruction. You've spent centuries living, but you haven't learned a single thing. He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. Lord Rimuru is a merciful leader. When he awakens, he may offer you a choice. He may offer you a new purpose. If I were you, I would take it. Because a life without purpose, that's a fate worse than death. He walked out, leaving Raisin sitting in the rubble of his own shattered ego. The battle of wills was over. Naruto had won without throwing a punch, without using a single jutsu. He had simply held up a mirror, and the reflection had broken the man. The days of waiting were heavy. The city was a place of quiet grief and solemn work. The dead from the initial attack were mourned, their loss a fresh wound. But then, a miracle. From the dome of darkness, motes of light descended, settling on the fallen. Shion, Gozu, and the 100 other goblins who had died, they stirred. They lived again. Their souls, carefully preserved by Rimuru, had been returned to new, perfected bodies. The explosion of joy that followed was a cathartic release, a wave of pure, unadulterated relief that washed away the city's grief. Shion's revival was the most dramatic. She emerged not as a Kijin, but as a wicked Oni, her power magnified tenfold, the holy power that had once been her weakness now utterly negated. The first thing she did was run. Not to Rimuru, not to her friends, but to the hill where Naruto stood his vigil. She saw him there, a lone figure against the pulsing darkness of the cocoon, and crashed into him, her arms wrapping around him in a hug that would have crushed a normal man. You're warm, she sobbed, burying her face in his jacket. For all her power, for all her fury, in that moment, she was just someone who had been to the edge of oblivion and back. Naruto was startled for a second, then he relaxed, his own arms coming up to awkwardly pat her on the back. He could feel the new, immense power radiating from her, but beneath it was the same fierce, loyal spirit. Welcome back, Shion. We missed you. She pulled back, wiping her eyes, a fierce grin breaking through her tears. I feel amazing. It's like, the whole world is clearer. I'm stronger. Strong enough to really protect you now. Her declaration, so simple and so absolute, sent a warmth through him that had nothing to do with chakra. The third day dawned, and the dome of darkness shattered, revealing Rimuru, floating in the air. He was no longer a slime or a simple human facsimile. He radiated an aura of divine majesty. His magicules, once a deep blue, now swirled with flecks of gold. He had awakened. A true demon lord. The city erupted in cheers. But Naruto only felt a quiet sense of relief. The weight of command lifted from his shoulders. That night, after the celebrations had quieted, Shuna and a newly invigorated Shion found Naruto on the roof of the town hall, overlooking the recovering city. The moon, a vibrant sapphire in the alien sky, cast a soft light over him. He wasn't celebrating. He was watching his clones work, directing the final repairs to the city, his expression somber and distant. "You carry it all, don't you?" Shuna's voice was soft as she came to stand beside him. "Even in victory. You carry the weight of what was lost." Shion stood on his other side, her usual boisterous energy replaced by a quiet intensity. Her near-death experience had given her a new perspective, a deeper appreciation for the quiet moments. "We are alive because of the choices you and Rimuru-sama made. There is no shame in that." Naruto let out a long breath, the tension finally seeping from his shoulders. "It's not shame. It's a reminder. That peace is fragile. I spent my whole life fighting for it, and I thought, when it was all over, that would be it. No more war, no more children dying. But it never ends. The fight just changes." He looked at the two of them, the fierce warrior and the graceful princess, two pillars of this new world he found himself in. They were not just his subordinates. They were his comrades, his friends. They had seen him at his most ruthless and had not turned away. "My old home," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "it was my world. But it was never really my home. Not like this." The people there, they saw the hero, the Jinchuriki, the Hokage. They saw the symbol. "Here, you just see me." He looked from Shuna's understanding eyes to Shion's fiercely loyal ones. "This place, and the people in it, you've become my home in a way Konoha never quite was." The confession hung in the cool night air, raw and vulnerable. It was an admission that this strange, alien world had given him something his own had not, a sense of belonging. The moment was thick with unspoken emotions. The bond between the three of them, forged in training fields, in council rooms, and in the heart of battle, had grown into something deeper. It was a three-way current of respect, admiration, and a fierce, protective affection. Shion, ever direct, was the one who broke the silence. She reached out, her hand gently taking his. Her touch was surprisingly soft for someone with so much strength. "Then let us be your home, Naruto." Shuna, on his other side, placed her hand on his other arm. "We will stand with you. We will share your burdens, and you will share our joys. That is the meaning of family, is it not?" Naruto looked at their hands on him, at their earnest, open faces. He thought of his life, a long, lonely road punctuated by epic battles and fleeting moments of connection. He had always fought for others, for a village, for a world. But he had never truly allowed himself to build something just for himself. A family. A future. In this moment, under the light of a strange moon, surrounded by the quiet hum of a city he had bled for, a new kind of clarity settled over him. His old dream was fulfilled. It was time for a new one. He did not have a ring. He did not have a grand speech prepared. He was Naruto Uzumaki. He was direct. He looked at Shion, then at Shuna, his blue eyes clear and unwavering. "All right." They both looked at him, confused. "All right?" Shuna prompted gently. "Yeah," he said, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face. It was not his usual foxy grin. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated happiness. "Let's make it official. I want you to be my family. I want to build a life here, with both of you." He took a breath, the words feeling both momentous and incredibly simple. Shion. Shuna. Marry me. The question wasn't a flamboyant proposal. It was a statement of fact. A declaration of his future. A vow to build a home not of wood and stone, but of shared bonds. An unwavering loyalty. Shion's jaw dropped. Her face, which could glower with terrifying fury, flushed a brilliant red. Words failed her for the first time in her life. She just stared at him, her violet eyes wide and luminous. Shuna's reaction was quieter, but no less profound. A radiant smile bloomed on her face, so bright it seemed to rival the moon. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of pure joy. Yes, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, Naruto Dano. Shion finally found her voice. A loud, joyous whoop of a cheer erupted from her. Yes. Of course, yes. She threw her arms around both Naruto and Shuna, lifting them both off their feet in a crushing, ecstatic hug. The decision was made. Not in a council room, not as a political alliance, but on a rooftop under the stars. It was a choice born of shared hardship and mutual respect, a testament to the strange and wonderful new life Naruto was building. News of the vice commander's engagement to the two Kijin princesses spread through Tempest like wildfire. It was not met with shock or scandal. In monster society, where power and bonds were the highest currency, it made perfect sense. The trio was already seen as a central pillar of Tempest's leadership. This simply solidified it. It was a cause for celebration, a symbol of a bright, strong future for their nation. Rimuru, upon hearing the news, bounced in his slime form with glee. Finally. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. A wedding. We have to plan a massive party. The weight of the war with Falmouth was lifted, replaced by the joyous energy of an impending celebration. But before they could begin, a formal invitation arrived. An invitation for Demon Lord Rimuru Tempest and his retinue to attend a Walpurgis banquet, a council of the Demon Lords. Clayman, the puppet master, had made his move, accusing Rimuru of treachery. The time for judgment had come. And this time, Naruto would be standing right beside his king. Chapter 6, The Walpurgis Deception. The space between worlds was a non-place of swirling, prismatic color, a corridor of pure magic. Traveling through it felt like being submerged in a dream. For the demon lords accustomed to such transit, it was mundane. For Naruto, it was a nauseating echo of his own violent arrival in this world, a sensation his chakra instinctively rebelled against. He stood with his eyes closed, his hand resting on the hilt of a new blade at his hip, a custom-made ninjato forged by Kaijin, perfectly balanced and humming with its own latent power. It was a gift from Shuna. Shion, for her part, had gifted him a new set of lightweight, black battle armor that fit under his cloak, a gift she'd helped Kaijin design. He was flanked by his fiancées. Shion stood tall and proud in her new, more formidable wicked Oni form, her odachi slung across her back, her gaze sweeping the space as if daring a threat to manifest. Shuna was a picture of calm elegance, her hands folded in her sleeves, but her senses were as sharp as any warrior's. They were part of Rimuru's official retinue, along with Ranga, who was curled in Rimuru's shadow. The corridor of light dissolved, and they found themselves on a high, circular platform suspended in a void of twilight. Stars glittered above and below, and in the distance, nebulae swirled like paint in water. In the center of the platform was a massive, round table. Several figures were already present, each one a maelstrom of power that made the air itself tremble. This was Walpurgis. The moment they arrived, every eye in the assembly turned to them. They passed over Rimuru, a new and unknown quantity. They glanced at the powerful Oni women. Then, they all settled on Naruto. And the murmuring began. A deep, gravelly voice rumbled. It came from Degrul, a giant of a man whose presence felt as solid and unyielding as a mountain range. His three eyes narrowed, not with hostility, but with profound curiosity. "What is a human doing at Walpurgis?" A lilting, amused voice answered from across the table. "Oh, he's much more than just a human, de Gruel. Can't you feel it?" Guy Crimson, the primordial red, lounged on his throne-like chair, his crimson eyes glowing with predatory interest. He stared at Naruto with the intensity of a connoisseur examining a priceless, impossible artifact. His energy, it doesn't sing the song of this world. It's like a note from a completely different symphony. How utterly fascinating. Naruto met Guy's stare without flinching. He could feel the demon lord's power, an ancient, bottomless abyss that could swallow stars. But he had looked into the eyes of a literal goddess of chakra and fought her to a standstill. He was not easily intimidated. The other demon lords, the sleepy-eyed Dino, the fairy-like Ramiris, the stoic Leon Cromwell, all watched him with varying degrees of shock and intrigue. He was an anomaly they couldn't classify, a puzzle that defied the fundamental laws of their world. A human standing as an equal among monsters, radiating a power that wasn't demonic, wasn't holy, and wasn't spiritual. Rimuru stepped forward, taking his place at the table. "This is Naruto Uzumaki, my vice-commander and the sworn guardian of my nation." The title sent another ripple through the assembly. Vice-commander. It implied a level of trust and authority that was unprecedented for a human in a monster nation. The final demon lords arrived, including the Harpy Queen Fry and the Golem King Carrion. Last to arrive was Clayman, his face a mask of smug satisfaction. He took his seat, his eyes glittering with malice as he looked at Rimuru. "Welcome, Rimuru," Clayman said, his voice dripping with condescension. "So good of you to come and answer for your crimes. I trust you're prepared to accept your judgment." The banquet began. Clayman launched into his tirade, a carefully constructed narrative of lies and half-truths, painting Rimuru as a usurper and a threat to the balance of power. He accused him of manipulating Carrion, of deceiving Fry, and of wantonly styling himself a demon lord. Naruto listened, his expression impassive. He let the puppet master play out his little show. He had already gleaned the truth from Sui's clones and his own intelligence network. He knew Clayman was being manipulated by a third party, and he suspected this entire farce was a distraction. As Rimuru began his calm, logical rebuttal, systematically dismantling Clayman's accusations with undeniable proof, Naruto's senses screamed. It was the whisper again. Cold. Alien. But this time, it was not in his mind. It was close. Anomaly present. Final sanction authorized. Purge the paradox. He subtly shifted his weight, his hand moving from the hilt of his sword to rest on his stomach. His gaze swept the assembly, past the demon lords, past their thrones, to the shadowed edges of the floating platform. Nothing. But it was there. A feeling. Like a razor blade being dragged along his soul. Clayman, seeing his case crumbling, grew desperate. He brought out a bewitched Malim, intending to use her as his trump card. It was a fatal miscalculation. Rimuru, with a single, powerful punch, revealed Malim's deception. She had never been under Clayman's control. The puppet master's plan fell into ruin. His face contorted with rage and terror. He was exposed, his manipulations laid bare before the most powerful beings in the world. And in that moment of ultimate distraction, as all eyes were on the humiliated Clayman, the assassin struck. It was not a physical attack. A figure shimmered into existence in the empty space behind the thrones. It was a being cloaked in pure, blinding white light, its form indistinct, more of a concept than a person. It raised a hand, not toward Rimuru or the enraged Clayman, but directly at Naruto. There was no sword, no energy blast. Only a single, spoken word, a divine command that sought to unwrite reality. Cease. The word slammed into Naruto with the force of a tectonic plate. It wasn't an attack on his body, but on his very existence. He felt a horrifying tearing sensation, as if the threads of his being were being forcibly unraveled from the tapestry of the world. His vision flickered. For a split second, he could see Shion and Shuna looking at him with confusion, as if they were forgetting who he was. But his chakra, his very soul, roared in defiance. Kurama bellowed within him, a furnace of pure life force resisting the erasure. "No, the fox's will boomed, reinforcing Naruto's own. We will exist." Naruto gritted his teeth, his body crackling with golden energy as he fought off the command. The air around him distorted, shimmering with the sheer force of his resistance. The attack, and Naruto's impossible defiance of it, did not go unnoticed. Guy Crimson shot to his feet, his playful demeanor gone, replaced by a look of utter, lethal fury. "Who dares?" he snarled, his power flaring to life. But the assassin wasn't finished. Since the conceptual attack had failed, it resorted to a more direct approach. The being of light solidified, revealing a figure in shimmering, featureless silver armor. It held a spear made of crystallized light, and it moved with a speed that made space itself seem to bend. Its target was still Naruto. "He's mine!" Shion roared, her odachi already in her hand as she moved to intercept. But she was too slow. The assassin was on a different level. The spear of light bypassed her, phasing through her swing as if it were a ghost. It reappeared an inch from Naruto's heart. Time seemed to slow down. Naruto's eyes, which had been wide with the strain of resisting the erasure, narrowed into sharp slits. He didn't try to dodge. He didn't have time. He let the spear hit him. It struck his chest with a sound like shattering glass. The holy energy, designed to annihilate any creature of magic or chaos, flared brilliantly. And was consumed. The golden chakra cloak that erupted around Naruto's body didn't just block the attack. It devoured it. The holy light was drawn in, swallowed by the vortex of raw, vital energy that was Naruto's Kurama chakra mode. His tattered cloak was blown away, revealing the vibrant, fiery form of his power. 9 swirling Magatama symbols appeared on his back, and his entire body glowed like a miniature sun. The assassin, the purifier, reeled back, its spear dissolving into motes of light, its solid form flickering. Impossible. No being of this world can consume the warden's light. Now, the entire Walpurgis was in an uproar. The battle between Rimuru and Clayman was completely forgotten. This was a new, infinitely more interesting conflict. A divine being of unknown origin had just attempted to assassinate a demon lord second-in-command in the middle of their sacred banquet. "So, the warden finally shows its hand," Naruto said, his voice now a layered chorus of his own and Kurama's. He took a step forward, the platform vibrating with his power. "You've been whispering in my head since I got here. Time to have a proper conversation." He vanished. He reappeared behind the purifier, a tailed beast bomb the size of a marble spinning on his fingertip. It was a pinpoint concentration of unimaginable destructive power. He pressed it against the purifier's back. "Get out of my world," the purifier hissed, spinning and slashing with a newly formed blade of light. Naruto didn't meet the blade. He flowed around it, his movements fluid and predatory. They exchanged a dozen blows in the span of a single second, a frantic, lethal dance of golden energy and blinding white light. The other demon lords watched, stunned. The sheer speed and power on display were beyond what some of them could properly track. This wasn't a battle between monsters. This was a clash of divine forces. "Enough of this foolishness," Guy Crimson's voice cut through the chaos. He made a gesture, and the very space around the two combatants seemed to thicken, slowing them down. The purifier, seeing its chance of a quick victory gone and the attention of every demon lord now on it, made a choice. It disengaged from Naruto, its form becoming translucent. "The paradox must be eliminated," it stated, its voice echoing as if from a great distance. "The warden's judgment is absolute. Your very existence unravels the loom of fate. The warden will correct this." Before Guy or anyone else could restrain it, the purifier shot a brilliant beam of white light, not at Naruto, but straight up, into the void. The beam traveled for an impossible distance before striking something. A ripple spread through the fabric of the pocket dimension, and for a heartbeat, everyone present could see it, a glimpse of a vast, sprawling empire of white towers and golden roads, an army of millions clad in the same armor as the Purifier, all marching eastward. Then the vision was gone. The Purifier dissolved into a shower of light, its last act a targeted broadcast of information. A beacon. A heavy silence descended on the platform. Clayman was on his knees, forgotten. Rimuru was staring at the space where the Purifier had been, his mind racing. Naruto let his Kurama chakra mode recede, the golden light sinking back into his skin. He felt the phantom sting of the erasure attempt, the cold touch of the warden's power. Well, the gruel rumbled, breaking the silence. That was certainly more entertaining than the usual Walpurgis. Guy Crimson walked over to Naruto, his crimson eyes burning with an unnerving intensity. He circled him slowly, his gaze analytical. The Order of Purity, he murmured. A fanatical sect of holy knights from a hidden nation beyond the Eastern Empire. They worship a primordial being of order they call the Warden. They believe in purging dimensional impurities to maintain the world's integrity. We thought they were just a myth, a boogeyman to scare archdemons. He stopped in front of Naruto. It seems you've made them very, very real. They've been hunting me since I arrived, Naruto stated simply. And you fought one of their assassins to a standstill, Guy finished, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. Rimuru Tempest. Your little nation is far more interesting than I thought. You not only have a new demon lord, but you harbor a being that can attract the attention of the gods. The dynamic of the banquet had irrevocably shifted. Rimuru's innocence was no longer in question. Clayman, now exposed as not just a liar but a fool who had been a pawn in a larger game, was swiftly judged. Rimuru, in a display of his new power, absorbed him completely, ending his pathetic existence. The Walpurgis concluded. The Octagram, the new council of 8-star demon lords, was formed. Rimuru was a full-fledged member. But as they prepared to depart, Leon Cromwell, the demon lord of El Dorado, approached Naruto. His expression was cold and aloof, but his eyes held a flicker of something else. That power you used, Leon said, his voice sharp. That golden energy. I have seen something like it before. A long, long time ago. From a hero summoned to fight a great evil. He paused. She failed. But she spoke of her home, a world of shinobi. A village hidden in the leaves. Naruto's heart stopped. Her name, he asked, his voice tight. She was never given one here. But she called herself, Leon hesitated, dredging up a long-forgotten memory. Rin. Rin Noera. The name hit Naruto like a physical blow. Rin. His master's teammate. A hero of Konoha who had died long before he was born. She had been here. In this world. The implications were staggering. He wasn't the first. Before he could ask more, Leon turned and walked away, his interest satisfied. The journey back to Tempest was a somber one. The victory at Walpurgis felt hollow, overshadowed by the revelation of the Order of Purity and their crusade. The beacon the Purifier had sent was a declaration of war. They now knew where to find him, and they were coming. Back in Tempest, in the command center, the mood was grim. So, a holy war is coming to our doorstep, Benimaru said, slamming a fist on the table. All because they've targeted Naruto-sama. It's not your war, Naruto said, his back to them as he stared at the map. The vision the Purifier had shown, the Eastern Empire, that was the direction the beacon had been sent. This is my fight. I can leave. Draw them away from Tempest. Don't be an idiot. Shion snapped, her voice cracking with emotion. She grabbed his shoulder, forcing him to turn and face her. You are the vice commander of this nation. Your fight is our fight. We are your family. Did your proposal on that rooftop mean nothing? Shion is right, Shuna said, her voice soft but firm as steel. She stood beside her sister in all but ceremony. To ask us to stand aside now is the greatest insult you could offer. We will face this order of purity, this warden, together. Naruto looked at their faces, at the unwavering resolve in their eyes. He looked at Benimaru, at Hakuru, at Rimuru, who simply nodded in agreement. He had tried to carry the world on his own shoulders for so long. It was a hard habit to break. A slow smile touched his lips. All right, he said. Together. He turned back to the map, his mind already shifting from defense to offense. The purifier sent its beacon east. It showed us a vision of their army. That means they're either in the Eastern Empire or beyond it. They've declared war. It's time we returned the favor. His eyes narrowed, a predatory glint entering them. The shinobi in him, the Kage, was taking over. They want to purge the anomaly. Fine. Let's show them what this anomaly can do. Sui, I want every clone you can spare moving east. I want to know everything. The size of their army, their leaders, their supply lines. And I want to know how deep their infiltration of the Eastern Empire goes. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Chapter 7, Infiltration and Sabotage. The Eastern Empire was a beast of steel and discipline. For centuries, it had been a slumbering giant, its immense military might held in check by the careful balance of power and the inscrutable will of its emperor, Rudra Nam ol Nazca. But now, the giant was stirring. Sui's reports, delivered daily through his clones, painted a chilling picture. Entire legions were being mobilized. Massive, magically powered tanks, looking like armored beetles the size of houses, were being moved to the western border. The sky above the imperial capital was thick with the traffic of airships. The empire was preparing for a war of annihilation, and its target was the Jura Tempest Federation. But there was a cancer within the beast. Naruto stood before the holographic map in Tempest's war room, a new technology devised by Rimuru and Vesta. He pointed to several key locations deep within imperial territory, a major fortress, a logistical hub, a command academy. The Order of Purity is not allied with the Empire, Naruto stated, his voice sharp. They have infested it. Sui's intel confirms it. High-ranking imperial generals, influential nobles, even instructors at their war colleges, they are all members of the Order. They are the ones pushing for this war, accelerating the timetable, whispering poison into the Emperor's ear. They're using the Empire's military as a divine hammer to strike us down. Rimuru, in his human form, crossed his arms. So the Empire itself may not be our true enemy. At least, not all of it. Exactly, Naruto agreed. Which is why a conventional defense is suicide. We can't fight the entire Imperial army head-on. Not yet. We need to cut the head off the snake. Or in this case, the cancer from the organ. He looked at the assembled executives. I'm forming a small, elite infiltration unit. Our mission is to move behind enemy lines, identify the leaders of the Order of Purity within the Imperial command structure, and eliminate them. We will sabotage their war effort from the inside out, sow chaos in their ranks, and buy ourselves time to prepare for the inevitable. A Kage squad, Benimaru murmured, using a term Naruto had taught him. A small team for Black Ops missions. Who are you taking? Sui, Naruto said without hesitation. His clones are our eyes and ears. His stealth is unmatched. Sui, who was already present as a silent shadow in the corner of the room, gave a slight nod. And me, Shion declared, stepping forward. It was not a request. Her hand was already on the hilt of her odachi. You need a heavy hitter. Someone to make a dent when stealth is no longer an option. I'm going. Naruto looked at her. Her power had grown exponentially since her revival. She was a walking calamity, but her control had increased as well, thanks to Hakuru's relentless training. More than that, her absolute loyalty was an anchor. He then looked at Shuna, expecting a protest, a plea to be careful. Instead, she just gave him a serene smile and held out a small, intricately woven pouch. I packed you rations. And a few specialized potions I developed. One to mask your energy signature completely for a short time. Be careful. Her trust in him, in his ability to survive, was more fortifying than any armor. All right, Naruto said. The three of us. We leave at nightfall. The journey east was a blur. They didn't travel on roads. They moved through the treetops, a phantom, a whisper, and a force of nature. Naruto, with his sage-enhanced senses and speed, led the way. Sui moved through the shadows, a ghost that was there one moment and gone the next. Shion, despite her size, kept pace with a ground-shaking, yet surprisingly stealthy, lope, her massive strength allowing her to leap chasms and bound up cliffs with ease. They crossed the border into Imperial territory under the cover of a storm. The land here was different. Tamed. The wild, chaotic nature of the Jura forest gave way to neatly organized farmlands and ruthlessly straight roads. The air itself felt disciplined, less saturated with free magicules. Their first target was a supply depot near the fortress city of Velter. According to Sui's intel, it was the staging ground for the armored divisions, and its commander, General Fargo, was a known zealot of the order. They observed from a ridge overlooking the sprawling military complex. It was a hive of activity. Soldiers marched in perfect formations. Magically powered cranes loaded massive shells onto transport vehicles. The entire place hummed with the energy of a well-oiled war machine. Too many guards for a frontal assault, Sui whispered, appearing beside Naruto. And the entire depot is shielded by a barrier that detects magical energy. It detects magicules, Naruto corrected him. Not chakra. He looked at Shion. Ready to cause a distraction. A wide, ferocious grin spread across Shion's face. Always. Naruto laid out the plan. Simple. Devastating. Phase 1 began at the stroke of midnight. Shion, under the cover of darkness, moved to the western side of the depot. She found what she was looking for, the massive aqueduct that supplied the depot with water. With a grunt of effort, she drove her odachi into the stone foundation. Then she channeled her power, not into a flashy attack, but into a focused vibration. The stone groaned, cracked, and with a deafening roar, 100-meter section of the aqueduct shattered, unleashing a tidal wave of water directly into the depot's barracks. Chaos erupted. Alarms blared. Soldiers scrambled from the flooding barracks, their perfect discipline washed away by the sudden disaster. Amid the confusion, Phase 2 began. Naruto and Sui, their presence completely masked by Shuna's potion, slipped through the main gate. They moved like ghosts through the panicked base. Sui's clones, already in place, sabotaged the magical engines of the tanks, planting explosive tags in their fuel lines. Naruto went for the heart. He walked straight into the command tower, the guards running past him toward the flood, oblivious to the invisible death walking among them. He reached the top floor, the office of General Fargo. The general was a bull of a man, roaring orders at his subordinates. Find the source of the flood. I want a report now. Is it a monster attack? Naruto let the potion's effect wear off. He simply appeared in the center of the room. The panicked subordinates froze. General Fargo spun around, his hand flying to the hilt of his sword. His eyes, the eyes of a fanatic, widened. You. The anomaly. The dimensional stain. You're the one staining the Empire's honor, Naruto said calmly. He held up a hand, and in it, a Rasengan began to spin. You and your order. Fargo drew his sword, which flared with a pale, holy light. For the purity of the world, he roared and charged. Naruto sidestepped him effortlessly. He didn't even bother with a direct confrontation. He let the general stumble past, then pressed the Rasengan against the main command console, the magical terminal that controlled the entire depot's logistics and communications. The console exploded in a shower of sparks and shattered crystal. The lights in the tower flickered and died. "That's for the paperwork," Naruto said. Then he turned to the stunned general. A clone appeared behind Fargo, tapping him on the neck. The general crumpled, unconscious. Naruto had no interest in killing soldiers, not even fanatical ones. His targets were the leaders who sent them to die. By the time Shion rejoined them, the depot was in ruins. The barracks were flooded, the command tower was dark, and half the armored division was silently rigged to explode the moment they were started. Their first mission was a success. For 2 weeks, they became phantoms of sabotage deep within the Empire. They moved from target to target, a whirlwind of calculated destruction. They derailed a train carrying a legion's worth of mana crystals by having Naruto create 1,000 shadow clones to physically lift the tracks from their foundations. The resulting crash was blamed on engineering failure. Sui infiltrated the Imperial Mage Academy and switched the curriculum notes for advanced barrier magic with Shion's unique cooking recipes. The resulting magical backlash from the student practicums shut down the academy for a month. They moved through the empire like a virus, unseen and devastating. They never killed civilians. They rarely even killed soldiers. They targeted infrastructure, command, and control. The reports flowing back to the imperial capital were a confusing mess of freak accidents, catastrophic incompetence, and unsolvable equipment malfunctions. The Order of Purity's perfectly orchestrated war machine was grinding to a halt, plagued by 1,000 tiny cuts. Their final target was the most ambitious yet, the fortress of St. Ustia, the command center for the entire Western Front. Its commander was Caligulio, one of the Emperor's most trusted corps commanders, and, according to Sui's most reliable intelligence, secretly the field commander for the Order of Purity's forces in the Empire. Taking him out would cripple the Order's influence over the invasion. The fortress was a masterpiece of military engineering, a mountain of black steel and magical barriers, bristling with anti-air cannons and thousands of elite soldiers. Infiltration would be next to impossible. "So we don't infiltrate," Naruto said, looking at the fortress from a hidden cave several kilometers away. "We knock." Sui and Shion looked at him. "Shion," Naruto said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "How hard can you hit?" Shion's grin was terrifying. The plan was audacious. Suicidal, even. It relied on a perfect, split-second coordination of their abilities. At dawn, Sui began. He used his clones and his thread ability to create a subtle resonance in the fortress's main barrier generator, creating a microfracture, a single weak point that would last for less than a second. At the exact same moment, Naruto entered Sage mode, gathering a massive amount of natural energy. He didn't form a Rasengan. He channeled all of it into Shion, pouring his Sage chakra into her like fuel into an engine. Shion roared, her own demonic power surging to meet his. Her Odachi began to glow, not with a holy light, but with a chaotic, violent purple-gold energy. It was a fusion of her raw power and his perfect control. "Now!" Naruto yelled. Shion swung her sword. The attack she unleashed was not a simple slash. It was a wave of pure, concentrated force, a Chaos Sage cannon, that tore a trench in the very earth as it traveled. It struck the fortress's main barrier at the exact microsecond Sui had created the weakness. The barrier, which could have withstood a volley from a fleet of airships, shattered like cheap glass. The wave of force continued, unabated, and slammed into the fortress's main gate. The gate, forged from 30 feet of solid magic steel, vaporized. The shock wave that followed flattened the first 100 yards of the fortress interior and sent soldiers flying. In the stunned silence that followed, Naruto, Shion, and Sui walked through the smoking crater where the gate used to be. The entire fortress erupted like a kicked hornet's nest. Legions of soldiers poured into the courtyard, their shock turning to fury. Sui, find Caligulio's command post. Naruto ordered. Shion. You're with me. We're the distraction. What followed was not a battle. It was a force of nature. Naruto and Shion became a whirlwind of destruction in the fortress courtyard. Naruto was a golden blur, his clones engaging entire battalions at once, his movements a symphony of taijutsu and elemental ninjutsu that left soldiers unconscious but alive. Shion was the opposite. She was a singular, unstoppable juggernaut. Her odachi, still glowing with residual sage energy, carved swaths through enemy formations. She didn't kill, but her swings sent soldiers flying, shattered armor, and broke formations with sheer, terrifying force. Together, they pinned down the fortress's entire garrison. Sui, moving unseen through the chaos, reached the central spire. He phased through a wall into a grand war room. There, surrounded by his personal guard, stood Corps Commander Caligulio. He was a tall, severe-looking man with cold, intelligent eyes. He was watching the battle below on a magical display, his expression not of panic, but of grim satisfaction. So, the anomaly and his pet demons have come, Caligulio said, not even turning as Sui materialized. He gestured, and his elite guards, the Imperial Crusaders, moved to surround him. They were all clad in the familiar white armor of the Order of Purity. You have fallen into our trap. The doors to the war room slammed shut. The walls began to glow with a containing field. I am not just a commander of the Empire, Caligulio announced, drawing a slender, elegant rapier that burned with a fierce white light. I am the Grand Master's left hand, the commander of the Warden's holy warriors on this continent. We knew you were coming. We let you cut away the weak limbs of our organization to lure the heart of the problem here. To me. He pointed his blade at Sui. Your rampage ends now. The Crusaders attacked. Sui, a master of one-on-many combat, was suddenly hard-pressed. The Crusaders were on another level entirely from the heralds. They fought with perfect coordination, their holy magic attacks designed to specifically counter his shadow and thread-based abilities. The battle below suddenly intensified. The ground began to tremble as Caligulio's trap sprung. Elite Imperial mages, hidden in the fortress walls, unleashed a massive gravity magic spell on the courtyard. The force was immense, designed to crush even a powerful monster. Naruto felt the pressure and grunted, his feet sinking into the stone. But Shion, caught off guard, was slammed to one knee, her immense strength barely holding her up. It's a trap, she roared, struggling against the crushing force. I know. Naruto yelled back. He formed a cross-shaped seal. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. 1,000 clones appeared, not to fight, but to dogpile on top of each other, forming a pyramid of bodies with Naruto and Shion at the base, physically resisting the spell through sheer mass and power. In the tower, Sui was wounded. A Crusader's light-infused blade had sliced through his arm. He was outnumbered and outmatched. He sent a desperate pulse through his thought communication link. Naruto-sama. It's the commander of the Purifiers. Trap. Need assistance. In the courtyard, Naruto's eyes snapped open. Shion. Hold on. He closed his eyes, entered Sage mode, and performed a feat of chakra control that defied belief. He sent a single, perfect clone, infused with a massive amount of Sage chakra, rocketing upwards. It shot like a golden bullet through the fortress, smashing through floors and walls, and burst into Caligulio's war room. The clone took in the scene in an instant, Sui bleeding, surrounded. Caligulio preparing to deliver the final blow. The clone didn't hesitate. Sage art, massive Rasengan. A Rasengan the size of a boulder materialized in its hand. It didn't aim for Caligulio. It aimed for the floor. The attack obliterated the entire floor of the war room, sending Crusaders, furniture, and Caligulio himself plummeting down into the chaotic battle in the courtyard below. Caligulio landed gracefully amidst the chaos, his eyes burning with fury. The gravity spell dissipated as its casters were thrown from their positions. Naruto, now free, faced the Purifier commander. "So you're the one in charge of this mess." "Anomaly," Caligulio snarled. "Your chaotic existence ends today." A brutal, 3-on-1 battle ensued. Caligulio was a master swordsman, his every move a blend of lethal imperial fencing and divine power. He was faster than Naruto, stronger than Shion, and more magically potent than Sui. He fought all three of them at once and held his own. But he made one mistake. He underestimated their bond. He lunged for what he perceived as the weakest link, a wounded Sui. As his blade shot for Sui's heart, Shion appeared in its path, taking the blow on her Odachi. The impact sent her skidding back, but she held. At the same time, Naruto appeared behind Caligulio, his hand a blur as he slapped a custom seal, one of Jiraiya's more esoteric creations, onto the back of the commander's neck. It wasn't an attack seal. It was a chakra absorption seal, modified to drain holy energy. Caligulio cried out as he felt his divine power being siphoned away, disrupting his connection to the warden. It was only for a second, but it was the opening they needed. Naruto's fist, wreathed in the wind of a Rasengan, slammed into Caligulio's stomach. Shion's Odachi, in a powerful upswing, shattered his rapier. Sui's threads, now tangible, wrapped around his limbs, binding him completely. They had won. Caligulio, bleeding and powerless, hung suspended in Sui's threads. He looked at Naruto, a fanatic's glare still in his eyes. "You think you've won? You've won nothing. My defeat here is the final beacon. The Grandmaster will know your true strength. He now knows what he must become to face you." He coughed, a bloody laugh escaping his lips. "The main invasion force is already on the move. And the corrupted hero is waiting for you on the battlefield. Face him, and face your end." With a final, defiant cry, Caligulio self-detonated, his body exploding in a blast of blinding white light that forced them all back. They stood in the ruined fortress, the remaining Imperial soldiers surrendering in droves. They had crippled the Order's command structure. But in doing so, they had sounded the final alarm. The real war was about to begin. Chapter 8, The Corrupted Hero. The high plains west of the Able Mountains were a sea of grass, stretching to the horizon under a vast, empty sky. Today, they were a sea of steel. 1,000,000 soldiers of the Eastern Empire stood in silent, disciplined ranks. Their armor gleamed. The barrels of 10,000 magical tanks pointed west. In the sky above, a fleet of 500 airships blotted out the sun. It was the single largest military force ever assembled on the continent, a testament to the Empire's terrifying might. They were not here to negotiate. They were not here to intimidate. They were here to erase Tempest from the map. Facing them, on the opposite side of the plains, was the army of the Jura Tempest Federation. It was a fraction of the size, a mere 100,000 strong. But it was an army of monsters. Benimaru stood at the front, his red hair a splash of color against the green tide of his soldiers. The Kijin, the Hobgoblins, the Dire Wolves, the Dragonauts under Gabru, all stood ready, their power a simmering, chaotic force of nature. On a hill behind them, Rimuru watched, his presence a calming, divine anchor for his entire army. This was no longer a skirmish. This was war. But Naruto was not there. He stood alone on a desolate, windswept peak in the Able Mountains, a range that separated the two armies. Sui's intelligence had been precise. The true leader of the Order of Purity, the Grandmaster, was not with the Imperial Army. He was here, waiting. This was a battle within a battle, a duel of ideals that would decide the fate of the war below. A figure waited for him at the summit, standing beside a single, weathered monolith of stone. He did not wear the white and silver armor of the Purifiers. He wore simple, functional leather armor, scarred and worn from 100 battles. A long sword of plain, unadorned steel was strapped to his back. He had kind eyes, a strong jaw, and a weary, gentle smile. He looked less like a fanatical grandmaster and more like a retired adventurer. "So, you are the anomaly," the man said. His voice was calm, reasonable, with no trace of the zealotry Naruto had expected. "They call you Naruto Uzumaki. I am Masayuki. Just Masayuki." Naruto's eyes narrowed. This was the man Caligulio had called the corrupted hero. This mild-mannered man was the leader of a fanatical, genocidal cult. "Be careful, Kit," Kurama's voice was a low growl. "His energy is quiet. Too quiet. It's like a sealed volcano." "You're the Grandmaster of the Order of Purity?" Naruto asked, stopping 20 paces from him. Masayuki sighed, a sound of profound weariness. "It is a title I bear, yes. Not one I particularly enjoy. The Order was my creation, born of necessity. A tool to combat a threat I thought no one else could see." He looked at Naruto, and his kind eyes held a deep, unshakable conviction. "The threat of paradoxes. Beings like you. You've manipulated an entire empire and sent 1,000,000 soldiers to their potential deaths just to get to me," Naruto stated, his hand resting on his ninjato. "Forgive me if I don't see you as a reasonable man. Reason has its limits when faced with cosmic catastrophe," Masayuki countered gently. "Do you know what you are, Naruto Uzumaki? You are a wound in the fabric of this world. Your chakra, your very existence, it is a foreign body that this world's laws cannot process. It slowly, subtly, rewrites the rules. For now, it is benign. You build, you protect. But eventually, the infection will spread. Your power will destabilize the very foundations of magic, of life itself. The world will unravel. I have seen it." His voice was filled with such certainty, such utter belief, that it was chilling. "I am not a villain, Naruto. I am a physician, and you are the disease. The surgery will be painful, but it is necessary to save the patient. And you're the one who gets to decide that." Naruto challenged. "You, another castaway from another world?" Masayuki's gentle smile faltered. "So you know." "Yes. I was summoned here, long ago. A hero. I fought the demon lords, I saved kingdoms. I was a champion." His eyes grew distant, haunted. "And then, I met the warden. It showed me the truth. It showed me the great loom of fate, the interconnected destinies of every being in this reality. And it showed me the threads that were fraying, the timelines that were collapsing, all because of paradoxes like us." He took a step forward. "The warden did not corrupt me. It enlightened me. It gave me a higher purpose than just being a hero. It gave me the sacred duty of being a guardian of reality itself. This was the core of it. A battle of ideals. Naruto, who believed in the power of bonds and free will to shape destiny. Masayuki, who believed in a pre-written fate that must be protected at all costs. "I won't let you destroy my home," Naruto said, his voice dropping low. "I won't let you slaughter my friends and family for your twisted sense of order. "I know," Masayuki said sadly. "And that is the tragedy. You are a good man, Naruto Uzumaki. In another life, we might have been friends. But I have a duty to perform." He reached behind him and drew his sword. The moment the plain steel left its scabbard, the world changed. The quiet, gentle man vanished, replaced by a being of incandescent, terrifying power. The air pressure plummeted. A crown of golden light, a halo of pure, divine energy, materialized above his head. His body began to glow with a power that made the purifier's holy light seem like a child's nightlight. This was not a man borrowing power from a celestial being. This was a man who had become a celestial being. The warden hadn't just enlightened him, it had fused with him. "I hoped you would understand. That you would sacrifice yourself for the good of this world, Masayuki said, his voice now a chorus of his own and the cold, cosmic voice of the warden. But your will is too strong. Your bonds to this world are too deep. Therefore, you must be broken. He moved. It was not a lunge. It was not a burst of speed. He simply existed in front of Naruto. His sword, now blazing with a light that seemed to unmake the very air it passed through, swung down. Naruto's reaction was pure instinct. He drew his own blade and blocked. The impact was silent. There was no clang of steel, no explosion of force. There was only a terrifying white light as Naruto's chakra-infused ninjato, a masterpiece of dwarven smithing, dissolved into dust in his hand. The force of the blow slammed into him, throwing him back, a searing line of white-hot agony across his chest. He tumbled through the air, crashing into the rock face of the mountain peak. He pushed himself out of the crater, his chest smoking, his healing factor already working to close the wound. He stared at the hilt of the sword still in his hand, the blade completely gone. This was a power on a different level. Beyond Kage. Beyond Herald. This was the power of a god. Kit. His power is actively negating yours. Kurama roared. It's not just an attack, it's an anti-chakra field. You can't fight him head-on. Your energy is a chaotic anomaly, Masayuki's dual voice echoed. My power is order manifest. It unwrites chaos. It unwrites you. Surrender. It will be painless. Naruto wiped the blood from his lip. He grinned, a fierce, defiant expression. Pain is an old friend of mine. And I never learned how to surrender. He slammed his hands together. Sage Art, Multi-Shadow Clone Jutsu. 1,000 Sage Mode Naruto clones erupted onto the mountaintop, a golden army against a single man. They charged, a wave of Raisengans, Elemental Jutsu, and Taijutsu experts. Masayuki didn't even move. He simply held his sword aloft. Order is absolute. Chaos is illusion. A wave of white light emanated from his blade. It washed over the clones, and they didn't burst in puffs of smoke. They simply ceased to be. They dissolved, their energy, their very existence, unwritten from reality. Naruto felt the backlash, the psychic scream of 1,000 of his selves being erased. The pain was immense, and he dropped to one knee, gasping. You cannot win, Masayuki stated, walking toward him. Your power is finite. My power is conceptual. I am the rule against which you are the exception. And the rule always wins. He was right. Standard shinobi tactics were useless. His jutsu were being erased before they could even form properly. His taijutsu was being nullified by the passive aura of order that surrounded Masayuki. So, I can't use my power, Naruto thought, his mind racing, pushing past the pain. I can't use chakra the way I always have. He looked up, his eyes blazing. But this world isn't just made of chakra. He closed his eyes, ignoring the approaching hero. He reached out, not with his chakra, but with the senses he had honed for Sage Mode. He felt the energy of the world around him. The chaotic, vibrant magicules of the air. The deep, stable energy of the earth beneath him. The raw, untamed power of the storm clouds gathering above. His chakra was foreign. It was chaos. Masayuki's power was order. But what if he used a different kind of chaos? The chaos that was native to this world. He had to blend. To adapt. To evolve. He forced his chakra network open, not to project power, but to draw it in. He pulled on the natural energy of Sage Mode. He pulled on the raw, wild magicules of the atmosphere. And he pulled on the deepest, most primal core of his being, Kurama's demonic, cataclysmic chakra. Chakra. Natural energy. Magicules. 3 distinct, warring energies. Forcing them together should have torn him apart. It should have been suicide. But in the crucible of his Uzumaki life force, under the sheer, indomitable force of his will, they did not tear him apart. They fused. An explosion of power erupted from Naruto, so immense it dwarfed anything he had ever unleashed before. It was not the calm, controlled gold of Sage Mode. It was not the fiery, angry red of Kurama's cloak. It was a maelstrom of iridescent, shimmering energy, a chaotic aurora of gold, red, and electric blue, all swirling around him in a protective, raging storm. His hair stood on end, his eyes glowing with a pure, white light. He had instinctively, desperately, created something new. A raw, unstable, and unbelievably powerful transformation. A state that blended his own world's power with this one's. A Sage God Mode. Masayuki stopped, his calm expression finally breaking. He stared at the whirlwind of power before him. What is this? This is not the anomaly's energy, it is something new. A hybrid, a monstrosity. Naruto looked at his own hands, at the storm of power crackling around them. It felt immense. And agonizing. The conflicting energies were tearing at his body from the inside, even as they empowered him. This was a temporary state, a double-edged sword that would destroy him if he used it for too long. But it would be long enough. Let's see your order, unwrite this, Naruto gritted out, the words crackling with raw power. He disappeared. He moved so fast that Masayuki, the man who could move between moments, was caught off guard. A fist, wreathed in the new, chaotic energy, slammed into the hero's side. This time, there was an impact. A thunderous boom that shook the mountaintop. Masayuki was thrown sideways, his armor of light flickering. The attack had landed. The hybrid energy, a fusion of two realities, was something his conceptual power couldn't just simply unwrite. It had to be fought. The battle began in earnest. It was a clash of titans, a duel of demigods on the roof of the world. The mountaintop became their arena. Masayuki's every swing was a slash of divine law, a blade of absolute order that could erase matter. Naruto's every blow was a punch of pure, untamed chaos, a fusion of energies that defied reality. They were evenly matched. Naruto's raw power and unpredictable movements against Masayuki's flawless technique and conceptual defense. The very mountain began to crumble under the force of their battle. Peaks were shattered. Valleys were carved. The storm above raged, its lightning striking the dueling figures, only to be absorbed into their clashing auras. But Naruto was on a clock. He could feel the Sage God Mode tearing him apart. His muscles screamed. His chakra coils felt like they were on fire. He had to end this. He saw an opening. Masayuki, expecting another direct assault, raised his sword in a defensive stance. Naruto feinted, then dropped low, channeling the entirety of his chaotic power not into his fist, but into his legs. He kicked the ground. The entire summit of the mountain disintegrated. The ground beneath Masayuki exploded into a cloud of dust and rock. For a single, crucial instant, the hero was off balance, his perfect stance broken. Naruto was already there. He appeared above Masayuki, his hands cupped together. He wasn't forming a Rasengan. He was gathering the entirety of his remaining hybrid energy, the swirling storm of gold, red, and blue, into a single, unstable, cataclysmic sphere. This is my will. Naruto roared, his voice echoing with the power of two worlds. My bonds. My family. This is my purpose. He thrust the sphere downward. He called it a tailed beast bomb, but it was something more. It was a paradox bomb. Masayuki looked up, his eyes wide. He saw the sphere of absolute chaos descending on him. He raised his sword, his aura of order flaring to its brightest, a desperate, final defense. The two forces met. For a moment, there was no sound. Only a blinding, silent light that consumed the world. The light of absolute chaos against the light of absolute order. Then, the world screamed. The explosion was not a fireball. It was a wave of reality-warping distortion that vaporized the top 300 meters of the mountain. The shockwave was felt hundreds of kilometers away, a tremor that shook both the Imperial and the Tempest armies to a halt on the plains below. When the light faded, there was nothing left of the summit but a glassy, cratered plateau. Naruto lay at the edge of the crater, his transformation gone, his body broken and bleeding. He was alive, but barely. Every muscle was torn, his chakra reserves completely dry. In the center of the crater lay Masayuki. His armor of light was gone. His sword was shattered. He was just a man again, bleeding from a dozen wounds. But he was alive. Naruto staggered to his feet, using a jagged piece of rock for support. He limped over to the fallen hero. Masayuki looked up at him, his eyes no longer holding the cold light of the warden. They were just the kind, weary eyes of a man who had lost. The fusion was broken. How? Masayuki whispered, his voice raspy. My order was absolute, your order has no room for outliers, Naruto rasped back, his throat raw. No room for change. No room for heart. That's not order. That's stagnation. That's death. In that moment, in his defeat, the warden's influence finally shattered, and Masayuki saw the truth. He saw Naruto, not as a disease, but as a protector. A man who fought with the power of his bonds. He saw the future he had been trying to prevent, a future where monsters and humans could coexist, a future forged by this impossible, chaotic, but ultimately good man. He had been wrong. I see, he murmured. A sad smile touched his lips. The physician was the one with the disease all along. He reached a trembling hand toward Naruto. But my defeat, my power being shattered, it's the final trigger. The beacon. The warden's last resort. Naruto's eyes widened in alarm. Caligulio was right, Masayuki coughed, blood trickling from his mouth. I was the seal. My power, the order I embodied, it was a lock on a great door. By defeating me, you have just unlocked it. His eyes filled with a new kind of terror. I have failed. Now, face God. He pointed a trembling finger to the sky. On the plains below, the two armies were still reeling from the shockwave. Then, they saw it. From the now flattened mountaintop where Naruto and Masayuki had fought, a colossal pillar of cold, white light erupted. It was not a violent blast, but a calm, silent, and terrifyingly solid beam that shot straight up into the heavens, piercing the storm clouds, piercing the very sky. It was a beacon that screamed its presence across dimensions. The final protocol had been activated. The warden was no longer working through proxies. It was coming itself. Chapter 9, The Warden's Judgment. The Pillar of Light was not an announcement. It was a summons. On the plains, the soldiers of the Empire and the warriors of Tempest stared, their war forgotten. The sheer, oppressive presence emanating from the beam was a universal language, and it spoke of an authority so far beyond them that their conflict felt like a children's squabble. Then, the sky broke. It did not crack like glass or tear like cloth. The very concept of a sky, of a blue expanse above, was peeled back. In its place was a view into a realm of impossible geometry and cold, hard light. And from this impossible realm, something descended. It was not a creature of flesh and blood. It had no face, no limbs in any recognizable sense. It was a being of pure, multifaceted law, a kilometers-tall crystalline structure that shimmered with the light of a billion captured stars. It was a living, thinking theorem, a god of mathematics and order. This was the Chronos Warden. It did not speak in words. It did not need to. A single, pure concept was projected into every mind on the continent, from the lowest goblin to Emperor Rudra himself. Judgment, the effect was instantaneous. The warden's first act was to impose its primary law, order. A wave of shimmering, translucent energy, visible only for a moment, washed over the battlefield. And everything stopped. The imperial soldier in the middle of drawing his sword was frozen, his hand on the hilt. The dire wolf in mid-lunge was suspended in the air, its fangs inches from an enemy's throat. A cannon shell that had just left its barrel hung motionless. The wind ceased to blow. The clouds stopped moving. The entire battlefield, the million-man army and the 100,000-strong monster force, was caught in a field of absolute temporal stasis. They were not dead. They were simply paused. Flies in the amber of a god's will. The stasis field spread, washing over the continent, over villages and kingdoms. Only a select few, beings whose very nature defied conventional laws, remained untouched. On the Tempest Command Hill, Rimuru stumbled, the wave of stasis washing over him. Great Sage screamed a torrent of error messages in his mind as it failed to analyze the phenomenon. He was a true demon lord, a being of divine class, and his resistance had allowed him to remain free. Far to the north, Guy Crimson lounged on his throne of ice, a lazy smile on his face as the wave hit his castle. Oh, my. He actually did it. The old clockwinder has finally gotten off his chair. This should be fun. And on the shattered mountaintop, Naruto, his body a canvas of pain, pushed himself to his feet. The stasis field washed over him, but his very nature as a paradox, an anomaly from another dimension, made him immune. He was the foreign element the system was trying to eject. He looked up at the colossal, crystalline being that now filled the sky. It had no eyes, but he felt its entire, undivided attention settle on him. This was it. The source of his troubles. The god of order that wanted him erased. The warden's second concept was projected. Erasure, Paradoxuzumaki Naruto, it began subtly. The ground beneath Naruto's feet, the glassy rock of the crater, began to pixelate. It broke down into shimmering, geometric patterns and then simply vanished, leaving a patch of absolute nothingness. He had to scramble back to avoid falling into the void. This wasn't destruction. This was deletion. The warden was unwriting the world around him, isolating him from reality. He felt a strange, dizzying sensation, a headache that was deeper than his skull. He saw a flash of memory, himself as a child, sitting on the swing, alone. The memory flickered, and for a second, the swing was empty. The memory of him was being targeted. In Tempest, Shuna, who had been watching the pillar of light with terror, suddenly gasped and put a hand to her head. For a split second, she couldn't remember why she was so worried. There was a man, a blonde man, what was his name again? The memory, the feeling, it was like a word on the tip of her tongue, fading into obscurity. Naruto, she cried out, her voice filled with a sudden, desperate panic. She didn't know why she said the name, only that she had to. She grabbed onto the memory, the image of his smiling face, with all her might. Her love, her bond, it became an anchor, a hook into the tapestry of reality that the warden was trying to reweave. Shion, standing beside her, felt it too. A terrifying emptiness where a fierce, burning loyalty should be. Vice Commander, she roared, the title a shield against the erasure. She remembered their spar, his effortless strength, his hand on her shoulder. These moments, these powerful emotional imprints, they were resisting the warden's logic. The warden, a being of pure law, registered this resistance. It was an unexpected variable. The bonds of affection were creating a paradox within its own paradox erasure protocol. Emotional and core-detected. Inconsistent with order. Expanding resurr parameter, the warden's logic was simple. If the target's connections were preventing a clean deletion, then the connections must also be deleted. Naruto felt a new wave of horror as he understood the warden's intent. It wasn't just going to erase him. It was going to erase everything he had touched. Tempest. His friends. This entire continent, if necessary, to ensure that the correction was complete. "Oh no, you don't," he snarled. The last dregs of his and Kurama's chakra flared to life, a tiny flicker of defiance. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for the reality of his new home. A streak of blue and gold shot across the sky, arriving at the mountaintop in a flash. Rimuru, his face set in a grim line, landed beside Naruto. He looked at his friend's battered body, then up at the colossal being in the sky. "So, that's the god your new fan club is so fond of," Rimuru said, his tone deceptively casual. "He's got a pretty terrible sense of interior design." "Rimuru." Naruto gasped, surprised. "You're not frozen." "True Demon Lord perk, I guess," Rimuru quipped, though his eyes betrayed his tension. He had just seen the warden attempt to erase the memory of his best friend from his own subordinates' minds. This was no longer a political problem. This was personal. "Great Sage, well, Seal now, says that thing is operating on a level of authority that supersedes most of the world's fundamental laws. It's not attacking us. It's editing us out." "I got that part," Naruto grunted, forcing himself to stand taller. "Got a plan?" "Just one," Rimuru said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "A king and his vice-commander defend their nation. Together." They stood side by side, a tiny slime-turned demon lord and a battered shinobi from another world, facing down a geometric god. "Okay, Seal, you're up." Rimuru shouted. "Analyze and deconstruct. Find me a weakness." "Understood." Analyzing divine law structure. Attempting to find logical contradiction in axiomatic framework. High probability of success if sufficient external force is applied, Seal's voice reported in his mind. "You heard her." Rimuru yelled to Naruto. "I'll be the scalpel, you be the sledgehammer. Just hit it. Hard." Naruto grinned, a bloody, battered, but utterly determined expression. "That, I can do." He cupped his hands together, pulling on the very last reserves of Kurama's power. A tailed beast bomb began to form, not a massive sphere, but a dense, tightly compressed beam. Rimuru held out his own hands. His ultimate skill, Beelzebub, Lord of Gluttony, swirled into existence, a vortex of dark energy that consumed even light. They unleashed their attacks in perfect sync. Naruto's tailed beast beam, a golden lance of pure chaotic energy, shot toward the warden's crystalline form. At the same time, Rimuru's Beelzebub opened a void directly in the warden's path, not to consume it, but to forcibly deconstruct the laws that held its form together. The warden registered the incoming attacks. Threat detected. Anomalous energy signatures. DPLONGCUNTRMASURE, Law of Absolute Defense, a facet of the crystal god's body glowed. A barrier of pure concept, a shield made of the mathematical certainty that nothing can pass, materialized before it. Naruto's beam struck the barrier and was instantly nullified, its energy unwritten. But it served its purpose. For a fraction of a second, it had forced the warden to focus its power on a single point. In that instant, Rimuru's attack hit. Beelzebub wasn't a physical attack, so the defense was less effective. It latched onto the warden's structure, and Seal went to work, her analytical speed pushed to its limits. She wasn't trying to break the law, she was trying to find a loophole in its wording. Analysis complete. Axiom, nothing can pass. Loophole identified, axiom does not define passing in a multidimensional context. Proposing solution, attack from an alternate vector, Seal reported. Good work. Rimuru praised. He turned to Naruto. It's got a blind spot. It can only defend against things from our dimension. Naruto's eyes widened as he understood. His very nature was his greatest weapon. You mean? Your shadow clones aren't just copies, are they? Rimuru said, a manic grin on his face. When you fought me way back when, great sage theorized they were being pulled from a parallel reality for a split second. Use that. It was a crazy, one-in-a-million theory. But it was all they had. Naruto closed his eyes, focusing. He didn't create 1,000 clones. He created one. But he poured everything he had into it, not just chakra, but the very essence of his dimensional otherness. He felt for that fleeting moment of transit, the non-space between worlds he passed through when he used the jutsu. And he held it. A single clone flickered into existence, not on the mountaintop, but inside the warden's absolute defense barrier. For a nanosecond, it existed in two places at once. The clone didn't have time to form a Rasengan. It only had time to act. It plunged its hand, crackling with Kurama's red chakra, directly into the warden's crystalline body. It was like plunging a hand into a supercomputer. The clone didn't feel flesh, but pure information. Pure law. And the warden screamed. It was a soundless, psychic shriek of pure, logical agony. A foreign piece of code had just been injected directly into its core programming. The crystalline form flickered violently. The absolute defense barrier wavered. Naruto's tailed beast beam, still firing, punched through the weakened barrier and struck the warden's main body. The explosion was immense, a silent blossom of golden fire that engulfed a huge portion of the crystal god's form. Shards of solidified law, each one containing a universe of information, rained down, dissolving before they hit the ground. They had wounded it. They had actually wounded a god. But it was not enough. The gaping hole in the warden's form began to regenerate, its geometric structure reasserting itself. It had been hurt, but its core process was undamaged. Error. Paradox Brechted. Core programming compromised. Initiating final protocol, system reboot. Target, Sector Durand adjacent regions. ESTMATD 10 minutes, Naruto and Rimuru felt the new directive wash over them. The warden was giving up on a surgical strike. It was going for a full system wipe. It was going to erase this entire corner of the world to ensure the paradox was eliminated. We can't beat it, Naruto said, his breath ragged. His final attack had drained him completely. He was running on fumes. We can hurt it, but we can't destroy it. It's not a thing. It's an idea. A law. They were only slowing it down. The 10-minute countdown was absolute. The temporal stasis field held the world still, unaware of its impending deletion. We can't destroy it, Rimuru agreed, his own energy reserves dangerously low. So what do we do? Naruto looked at the regenerating god, at the frozen battlefield below. He thought of his new home, of Shion and Shuna, of the promise he had made to build a future here. He had tried to fight this thing, to overpower it. But that was a shinobi's solution to a warrior's problem. This wasn't a warrior. This was a force of nature, a law. And you don't fight a law. You argue with it. A sudden, desperate clarity filled his mind. It was the same clarity he'd had when facing Nagato, when facing Obito, when facing Sasuke. The realization that the fist was not the only answer. Kit? What are you thinking? Kurama asked, his voice weak but curious. I'm thinking, Naruto projected back, a strange calm settling over him, that I've been trying to solve this problem the way Sasuke would. It's time I tried solving it my way. He turned to Rimuru. I have a plan. It's insane. It probably won't work. But it's the only thing I can think of. I'm all out of bright ideas, Rimuru said. Let's hear it. Naruto took a deep breath. Fighting isn't enough. We have to make it listen. Chapter 10, The Anomalies Vow. Naruto stopped fighting. The decision was so abrupt, so contrary to every instinct he had, that it felt like a betrayal of his own nature. He let his exhausted arms fall to his sides, the last embers of Kurama's chakra cloak flickering out. He stood on the shattered mountaintop, battered and bleeding, and simply looked up at the colossal, crystalline god that was preparing to unwrite his world. "Naruto, what are you doing?" Rimuru yelled, his own power still swirling, ready for another desperate assault. "It's still regenerating. Fighting it is like trying to punch a hurricane, Rimuru," Naruto said, his voice quiet but clear. "We can't win by destroying it. It's a being of pure logic. So I have to give it a new argument." He closed his eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. He reached inward, not for power, but for something far more potent. He gathered up his memories, his experiences, the very essence of his soul. He pulled on the loneliness of his childhood, the joy of his first true friends, the pain of losing his master, the triumph of saving his village. He gathered the fierce, protective love he felt for Tempest, the quiet understanding he shared with Shuna, the unwavering loyalty he received from Shion. He wasn't preparing an attack. He was preparing a broadcast. "Kit, what is this? You're gathering your very essence." Kurama's voice was a roar of alarm inside him. "This is more dangerous than your sage god mode. If it rejects you, there will be nothing left of your soul." "I know," Naruto projected back. "But this is the only way. It thinks I'm a bug in the code. I have to show it that I'm a new feature." He channeled all of his will, all of his remaining life force, into a single purpose. He wasn't going to talk. He was going to show. "Talk no jutsu, divine edition," he whispered to himself, a faint, wry smile on his lips. Then he unleashed it. A wave of pure, golden energy erupted from him. But it held no destructive force. It was a psychic tsunami, a broadcast of his entire life, his entire being. It was the pain of 1,000 beatings, the warmth of a bowl of Ichiraku ramen, the weight of a promise to a dying friend, the fierce joy of a Rasengan hitting its mark. The wave washed over the mountaintop, over Rimuru, and slammed into the Chronos Warden. The Warden, a being of pure, cold logic, was suddenly inundated with something it could not compute: emotion. Raw, unfiltered, human experience. It experienced Naruto's vow to become Hokage. It felt the sting of Sasuke's betrayal at the Valley of the End. It felt the crushing despair of Jiraiya's death, and the soaring hope of Nagato's redemption. It felt every punch, every failure, every hard-won victory. And then, the broadcast shifted. The Warden was shown Tempest. It saw a village of disparate monsters, once living in fear, now working together. It saw Naruto's clones building houses, Shion's disastrous but heartfelt cooking, Shuna's quiet diplomacy. It was shown the smiles of goblin children, the proud work of the dwarf artisans, the unwavering loyalty of the Kijin. It saw the world not as a set of rules, but as a network of bonds. The Warden's regeneration stuttered. Its core programming was being flooded with illogical, chaotic, but undeniably significant data. Query: datastream unclassified. Content type: hope, love, sacrifice. CONCPTSNCOMPTBLEWITHPRMRYWCTIV. Naruto pushed harder, focusing the broadcast. He showed the Warden the battle against the Falmouth army. He showed it Rimuru's grief, the weight of the souls he had harvested. And he showed it the joy of the revival, the moment Shion and the others had returned to life. He showed it a leader willing to become a monster to protect his people. Then he showed it his connection to Shion and Shuna. It wasn't just a memory. Through Naruto's own soul, the Warden could feel their powerful emotions, anchored to him across the battlefield. It felt Shuna's quiet, steadfast love, a belief in him that was as strong and deep as the earth. It felt Shion's fierce, burning devotion, a loyalty that would challenge the gods themselves. Their bonds were not just data points, they were pillars, integral parts of the world's new structure. He was projecting his ultimate argument: to erase him was not to restore order. It was to create a new, greater chaos. To erase him now would be to unravel the positive growth of Tempest, to negate the alliances being forged, to invalidate the sacrifices made. It would be to tear a hole in the hearts of those who loved him, a wound that would fester and spread its own kind of chaos. The Warden, for the first time in its eons of existence, was faced with a true logical paradox. Logical conflict. Directive: eliminate paradox to maintain order. Nudita: elimination of paradox will result in it loss of order and create cascading system chaos. Conclusion: both action and inaction violate a primary directive. System halt: the colossal, crystalline form of the god froze. The 10-minute countdown to erasure paused at 1 minute and 34 seconds. The being of pure law had encountered a problem it could not solve. It was stuck in a logic loop. Naruto saw his chance. He was on his last legs, his soul feeling thin and frayed from the broadcast. But he had to seal the deal. He took a step forward, his voice now a weak but steady rasp. You see now. I'm not a virus. I'm a mutation. An evolution. Your job is to preserve order. But order isn't stagnation. True order is growth. It's adaptation. He raised a hand, pointing not at the Warden, but at himself. I am a paradox. I am an anomaly. I will never fit neatly into your system. So let's make a new deal. A new covenant. He projected one final, powerful concept. Not a memory, but a vow. I will be the guardian of this world's balance. I am a being of two realities, a bridge between chaos and order. I will take it upon myself to be a new pillar of this world, to correct the imbalances that you cannot. When a paradox threatens to truly destroy this world, I will be the one to stop it. Let me be your agent of order, not your target of erasure. I, the anomaly, hereby vow to uphold the stability of this dimension. It was the ultimate gamble. He was offering to take on the Warden's own duty, to become its hands in the world. The Warden's crystalline form began to shimmer, its facets shifting and realigning. It was processing the new proposal. It was a logical, efficient solution. A self-correcting system. An anomaly that polices other anomalies. It was a chaotic solution, but it was still a solution. Proposal accepted. New directive: observe and validate. Paradoxes or class fides, dimensional regulator probationary. JUDGMENT PROTOCOLSUSPNDD, the cold, divine presence began to recede. The impossible geometry in the sky folded back in on itself. The pillar of light that had served as its anchor faded into nothing. The sky, blue and clear, snapped back into place as if it had never been gone. The Warden was gone. The moment its presence vanished, the temporal stasis field broke. 1,000,000 soldiers and 100,000 monsters were suddenly unfrozen, their suspended motions completing in a disorienting, chaotic instant. The dire wolf bit into empty air. The Imperial soldier's sword finished its draw. The cannon shell, its momentum restored, flew for another 100 feet before clattering harmlessly to the ground. A collective gasp went up from the two armies as they took in the scene. The flattened mountaintop. The lingering scent of ozone and something holy. The sudden, profound silence. On the peak, Naruto's legs finally gave out. He collapsed, his consciousness wavering. Rimuru rushed to his side, catching him before he hit the ground. You crazy, magnificent idiot, Rimuru breathed, a mixture of awe and terror in his voice. You just talk no jutsu to God. Naruto gave a weak, exhausted grin. Told you it was a good plan. And then he passed out. The war was over before it had truly begun. The descent of the Warden had shattered the will of the Empire. Faced with a power that could freeze 1,000,000 soldiers with a thought, their pride, their discipline, their entire motivation for war, crumbled into dust. When a message from Rimuru arrived, offering a ceasefire and a chance for diplomatic talks, Emperor Rudra, for the first time in his long reign, accepted unconditionally. Weeks later, Tempest was a city transformed. The gloom of war had been replaced by an explosive, joyous energy. The unconditional surrender of the Eastern Empire had sent shockwaves across the world, cementing Tempest's position as a global superpower. New embassies were being built. Trade routes were flourishing. The future Rimuru had dreamed of was rapidly becoming a reality. And today, it was a day of celebration. The central plaza was decorated with flowers and banners. Creatures from all over the continent had come to attend. There were dwarves from Dworgen, envoys from Blumend, lizardmen, orcs, and even a few curious Tengu from the mountains. In the seats of honor were demon lords, a grumpy-looking Degrul, a bored Dino, and even a surprisingly cheerful Ramiris. At the center of it all, on a raised platform, stood Naruto. He was dressed in a formal black and orange haori, custom-made by Shuna. His face was clean, his hair was neat, and he looked healthier and more relaxed than ever before. The scars of his battles had faded, but the strength in his eyes was brighter than ever. To his right stood Shion, resplendent in a stunning, deep purple kimono that somehow managed to be both elegant and intimidating. A radiant, almost giddy smile was fixed on her face. To his left stood Shuna, the picture of grace in a pink and white layered kimono, her own smile serene and full of a deep, profound happiness. This was their wedding day. Rimuru, in his human form, officiated the ceremony. It was a blend of human traditions from his world and monster customs from this one. It was loud, chaotic, and full of joy. When the vows were exchanged, they were simple and from the heart. "I vow to be your shield," Shion said, her voice booming across the plaza, yet thick with emotion. "I will stand before you in any battle, and my life will be the fortress that protects your heart." "I vow to be your home," Shuna said, her voice softer, but no less powerful. "I will stand beside you in council, and my wisdom will be the sanctuary where your spirit can rest." Then it was Naruto's turn. He looked at Shion, then at Shuna. He looked out at the sea of smiling faces, at the nation he had fought for, at the family he had built. The emptiness he had felt after the war, the loneliness of a hero whose job was done, it was all gone. Replaced by a feeling of fullness, of purpose, of belonging. "I thought my story was over," he said, his voice ringing with a newfound peace. "But you all showed me it was just the beginning of a new chapter." He took both of their hands. "I vow to be your future. I will share your burdens, celebrate your triumphs, and build a life with you that is worthy of the peace we've fought for. Here, in our home." The plaza erupted in a deafening cheer. Later that evening, as the festival raged on, the three of them stood on the balcony of their new, shared home, a large house built on the hill overlooking the city. The sounds of music and laughter drifted up to them. Shion leaned her head on his shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her lips. "Best day ever." Shuna rested her hand on his arm, her head leaning against his other shoulder. "It is the start of many more to come." Naruto wrapped his arms around his wives, pulling them close. He looked out at the twinkling lights of Tempest, a city he had helped build, a city he had saved. He was no longer just Naruto Uzumaki, the hero of Konoha. He was Naruto Uzumaki, vice commander of Tempest, husband to two incredible women, and the probationary guardian of a world. He was no longer a castaway. He was no longer an anomaly. He was finally, truly, home. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.